You're alleging that law enforcement officials in the state committed murder and that they're covering it up. Why would they want to be involved in this?
Because he's dead. I think things went too far. It was late. There was alcohol involved, but they're all family.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, how is everybody? Karen Reed has been charged with second-degree murder of her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe. Reed is accused of hitting O'Keefe in January of 2002 with her car and leaving him to die in the snow in front of a friend's house in Canton, Mass, after the couple shared a night of drinks. The case has amassed a group of supporters and detractors alike, the former asserting Reed was framed, and the detractors arguing the state has it right. Hasn't gone to trial yet. And Reed is guilty. Today I thought I'd do something new and look at the case just from Reed's own words. So we're going to look at an interview she gave to Nightline. It's not long, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that I observe. And of course, usually, if you're new to this channel, my name is Roberta Glass. I cover true crime from the court transcripts and the courtroom. I've covered the NXIVM hearings, Jeffrey Epstein-related hearings when he was alive, Keith Raniere's trial, Larry Ray's trial from the courtroom, and Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, all from the courtroom. So this is a very interesting case because we have a huge innocence campaign before it's ever been proven one way in court. So we really haven't seen all the evidence. Certainly, Ms. Reed has not taken the stand, nor has she been cross-examined. And you can say anything you want in a Nightline special. Certainly, there isn't any punishment for lying to the press. And the head of the Free Karen Reed campaign has been charged with intimidating witnesses. I find it very interesting that Ms. Reed has not come out and said, don't do this. They're known for knocking on doors, accusing other people in the case of murder, which I find very interesting for an innocence campaign to accuse someone who hasn't even there's been no evidence presented against them. So that's what they're accusing the state of doing, of charging up a case with no evidence. They seem to be doing it themselves. But let's look at this Nightline case. And all I ask is that you keep it civil in the comments. I know that emotions can run hot. I'm going to give my opinion. But please, all I ask is that you be civil and support your argument. No personal attacks, okay? All right, so let's look at this Nightline interview.
That law enforcement officials in the state committed murder and that they're covering it up. Why would they want to be involved in this?
Because he's dead. I think things went too far.
Right, so because he's dead. So we were given no reason why they want him dead, no reason why that a cover-up should ensue. That seems very flippant to me, and she seems so sure of it. If this were me, I'd say, I don't know, but I didn't do that. I'd be sure I didn't do it. And she seems unsure, and you'll see more as the interview goes on.
It was late. There was alcohol involved, but they're all family, and there's many of them involved.
So she's appealing to a kind of trope in America that the blue protects their own. And of course, because our police department is made up of people, and people are fallible, and you're going to have all sorts of people in the police department. And because we've had police scandals before, she's saying, look at history. This has happened before, but she can't state specifically why or what those connections are or why they would want to do this. So this is...
After posting bail, Reed has spent much of the past 18 months in and out of court, awaiting a trial date.
And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
This is really interesting that she's saying no one else wants the truth. So yesterday, they just had a motion to dismiss, which means we don't even want to go to trial. Just nip this case in the bud, which if it were me, I would, and my understanding, she's raised some money for her defense. I would be dying to prove my innocence in a court of law. But because we've had, our media has been, we have a whole movement out, wrongful conviction movement has done such damage with our media's help on our justice system. I think it's easy for supporters to believe, well, of course, she's not going to have a fair thing. There's too many powerful people involved. Okay. Which could be. We haven't seen the case yet. She may have a smoking great case, and I'll be the first to come out and admit that the way I'm looking at it may be wrong.
Prosecutors allege that Reed hit O'Keefe with her car after getting into an argument earlier in the day, leaving him to die in the middle of a snowstorm in January 2022. But Reed says she had no reason to harm her boyfriend.
I would call him the
This is an argument you often hear. I had no reason to. And really, it's sort of like half of the sentence. I mean, I have no reason that you know of, because we couldn't know what went on between them that night. And that's a little bit of the power that she has.
Patron saint of Canton. He was just very selfless, frugal, and I think
See, there's something that's interesting to me. So she says selfless and patron saint. Those are all really good qualities, great qualities. And then she says frugal. Is that, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that, I thought that was a little bit of a put down there.
I'd be hard pressed to find anyone that didn't care for John.
The couple first dated in their 20s and reconnected.
Care for him. Love him. Care for him. Interesting.
More than a decade later, in the middle of the pandemic.
So how did you meet up again?
He had reached out to me on Facebook and he said, hey, blast from the past, how's things? And when I saw his picture, his profile picture was with...
So she's very charismatic. Very confident, very charismatic. We saw if you saw my opening clip, she walked into the courtroom with a lot of charisma. She's very pretty. She really takes charge. So she's not someone who's rounding her shoulders, chest sunken in, kind of looking up from her eyes, chin down, like we saw Princess Diana do. She is really very confident and really eager to sell her story to the public.
several young children. And then it triggered my memory that his sister and his sister's husband had passed away. And he told me, yeah, I have the kids now. I admired that. I thought that was amazing.
Soon, Reed says she became part of the family, often sleeping over at O'Keefe's house and helping take care of the kids.
He would go to work and I would stay with his niece and nephew. All of the breaks that the kids had, we did something.
But their relationship also had its...
We did something. Isn't that interesting? I would love to know what they did together. That were me, I wouldn't say we did something. I would be like, we went to Disney World, we did this, we did that. These kids were amazing.
struggles. Reeve says O'Keefe had been relying more on her to take care of the kids and that he criticized some of the decisions she made with them.
We had had an argument on New Year's Eve. We were away on vacation, and he became incoherently drunk. And I ended up ringing in the new year with his niece and nephew. John didn't
Oh, that must have been horrible.
come back to our room till after 3 a.m. So that was rough. I felt very much taken advantage of. He apologized.
Wait, so she wasn't insulted? He became belligerent and left her alone? But she felt taken advantage of, but her feelings weren't hurt? She wasn't crushed by that? Left alone on New Year's? That's like one of the most romantic nights of the year for new couples. I mean, I know that they had reunited. They've been an old couple, now they're back together, but kind of interesting.
Profusely for what happened on New Year's Eve. And he said, if you can't get over it, then you need to spend some time at yours. I can't keep apologizing. I don't want to keep rehashing this.
A few weeks later,
That's interesting. So he's saying, I can't keep apologizing, but she doesn't say at any point he did apologize. So she's kind of painting him a little bit as a bully.
they were in
Which is interesting because when people pass on, usually their good qualities become elevated and they become the best person ever. So we see that in the beginning. She's saying he's a patron saint. Everyone cared for him. And now she's painting him by the story she's telling as a bully who made her feel like she was basically a glorified babysitter.
invited to meet up.
I mean, how many patron saints do that, act that way? Whoop. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Ugh. My apologies.
Had been relying more on her to take care of the kids and that he criticized some of the decisions she made with them.
We had had an argument on New Year's Eve. We were away on vacation, and he became incoherently drunk. And I ended up ringing in the new year with his niece and nephew. John didn't come back to our room till after 3 a.m. So that was rough. I felt very much taken advantage of. He apologized profusely for what happened on New Year's Eve, and he said, if you can't get over it, then you need to spend some time at yours. I can't keep apologizing. I don't want to keep rehashing this.
A few weeks later, they were invited to meet up with some friends at the Waterfall Bar in Canton. And there, they ran into Brian Albert, a fellow Boston police officer who Reed says O'Keefe looked up to. Albert had led the city's gang unit before commanding the Fugitive Apprehension Team. It was the elite squad responsible for taking down some of the city's most dangerous criminals and featured in the 2013 TNT show, Boston's Finest.
1 minute we're walking around, everything's fine, and then 1 minute it's not fine.
Both times I met Brian Albert, he seemed like the type of person that you'd be surprised he's out socially because he doesn't seem like he ever wants to be there.
But at the bar, Reed says there was an invitation to continue hanging out at Albert's home.
I said, can we make sure we're welcome here? Nobody extended the invite to me. I didn't.
Okay, so she already feels unwelcome, and there's already tension. She says he didn't seem like he wanted to be with them when they were out or out with anyone, period. He wasn't a social person, and she didn't feel welcome. So does a patron saint do that to his beloved girlfriend? Drag her to places where she's not welcome?
Hear the invite extended to you.
They drive to the Alberts' house. What happens next is disputed.
So I pull at the foot of the driveway. It's snowing. John has no coat on. It's windy. So I drop him off. He goes up the driveway and approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone.
Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in her car, she became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her, and she drove back.
So he's also the kind of boyfriend who doesn't wait, Did she just say he waved back at her? Or let her know that he was... Wait, hold on. Let me go back and really open my ears and listen to what she's saying. Hold on.
I didn't hear the invite extended to you.
They drive to the Alberts' house. What happens next is disputed.
So I pull at the foot of the driveway. It's snowing. John has no coat on. It's windy. So I drop him off. He goes up the driveway and approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone.
Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in her car...
Wait, so right when he's at the door, that's when she looks at her phone? That's awfully convenient. So, I mean, isn't that the time? I guess I've had cab drivers, actually. I live in the city, New York, and wait up and make sure I make it through the door. Usually if you're dropping someone off or you're waiting for someone, the key moment where you're not going to look at your phone is right when they're at the door.
She became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her, and she drove back to his home where she continued calling him before, she says, she fell asleep around 1:30 in the morning. She then says she woke up before 5 a.m. He still wasn't home. She then started canvassing the neighborhood.
Just gonna drive around in the 2 square miles that we spent the preceding night.
After 20 minutes...
Okay, so this guy has a history of getting... at least once getting really, really drunk. I mean, some cops have especially Boston cops have a reputation for drinking. And so she knows he can get drunk. Why is she so worried about him? Why is she running around and so worried about him? Wouldn't she just think that he got too drunk and passed out? So Sherry Davis, thanks so much. Roberta, I know lots and lots about this case. Oh, I'd love to talk to you because I'm just getting into it. I just watched the hearing yesterday. Thought it was very interesting. She's got a very television-friendly lawyer. Yet I missed your beginning. Oh no. It's just this interview. It's just a clip from this interview. So I'm just looking at this case from not knowing a whole lot and just trying to look at the case from her own words. Of course, there hasn't been a trial. And I don't even know what documents are available as far as the investigation in this case. It may be a terrible investigation. I find a lot of her statements very contradictory. So that's what I'm looking at.
Of unsuccessful searching, she called John's friend, Carrie Roberts, and Jennifer McCabe, Brian Albert's sister-in-law, who was also at his house the night before. The 3 women together now headed to Albert's home.
How soon was it when you pulled in there that you saw John's body?
Immediately. And what struck me when I saw him was his mouth was open a little bit and his eyes were shut and he had spots of blood in different areas on his face.
Okay.
So that's not traumatic for her to retell? What was the relationship? Were these 2 in love? Are we supposed to believe these 2 were in love? Wouldn't that be absolutely traumatic for you? The retelling, seeing the one that you love in the snow, you find them, their mouth is open, they have blood on their face. But she seems to be telling it just very matter of fact, like she's ordering a sandwich.
O'Keefe was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead. He died from blunt force trauma and hypothermia.
So blunt force trauma. So was there some kind of, is she skipping time here? Was there some kind of fight that they had? And what I saw from one of these hearings was he has a lot of scratches, which to my eye could be defensive, her scratching at him with her nails. But obviously, they're going to have their defense witnesses, and that's what they presented yesterday, the idea that he absolutely could not have, they've hired on a expert witness who's getting paid by the defense to say that he couldn't have died in the way that the state made. And the state will have their own witnesses that they're paying.
It wasn't long before Reed became the #1 suspect. Authorities say they had noticed a cracked taillight after they seized her car.
I had told both Jen and Carrie that I cracked my taillight. I said I just hit my car on top of everything, but I didn't look at the damage. And both women said, it's cracked, it's cracked. Calm down.
Wait. So she said, I cracked my taillight, but I didn't look at the damage. So how did she know that she cracked her taillight if she didn't look at it? Does that make any sense? So then her girlfriends look at it and they say, don't worry, it's cracked, it's cracked. So when I heard this the first time around, I thought it was very interesting that she didn't say, usually you say, or the phrase that I'm used to hearing with taillight is I smashed my taillight. And that would give a reason for the piece being there, right? You smashed my taillight. But how did she know what she did? You just hear a sound. Sometimes you hear a sound and you go out and it's fine. And you're like, whew. Have you ever parked and you hit another car and you're like, oh gosh, that didn't sound good. And you go out and it's okay, or there's just a little scratch. But it's very odd that she's saying she knew exactly what she did without investigating.
You cracked your taillight. You're okay. Let's go look for John.
But according to police statements...
See, so do you see what she said? She said, you cracked. That's okay. To me, it sounds like she's saying you blew up. You might have lost control. Also, there's also the phrase crack up, to lose control. It's okay. And she says, just look for John. You're okay. She says right after that, not the car is okay. You're okay. So there's some kind of association in her mind between cracking up and this cracked taillight and this word cracked and what happened that night. Thought it was interesting.
Jennifer McCabe told authorities that while they were looking for O'Keefe, Reed stated, could I have hit him? Did I hit him?
Okay, so if you know you didn't, it's not possible. You don't ask the question like it is possible. So she and her supporters feel like it's 100% impossible that she did this. So why is she asking the police? Unless you believe that the police are making this up, but she's not arguing that. She's saying, I did ask these questions.
And when O'Keefe's body was discovered, first responders who arrived on the scene say they overheard Reed make other statements.
Firefighter said that you said, I hit him.
I said, I hit him. It was preceded by a did and proceeded by a question mark.
So there she's admitting. She's denying that she admitted to hitting him, but she's saying, I asked, did I hit him? But she's once again asserting that this is absolutely impossible. So when something's really impossible and you're sure you didn't do something, you're not going to bring it into the realm of possibility.
What I thought could have happened was that did I incapacitate?
This reminds me of Amanda Knox when she says, I was asked to fantasize and asked to tell what could have happened and make up a fantasy. I mean, there's just, don't get me started on that case. All right.
Incapacitate him unwittingly, somehow, and then in his drunkenness, passed out.
When you walked out of the bar, how many drinks had you had?
I had probably about 4.
The Commonwealth.
So she's saying it's probable, but it's possible I had more. I had probably about 4. And you'll see that they're arguing that she had 9, which is, if you're trying to underplay it, and this is a fact that she has to basically cop to, because there is a little bit, we're talking about the death of a police officer, basically fess up to, because they have her alcohol, which was extremely high. Blood alcohol.
It says that you
level.
had 9 drinks that night. That's what the prosecution says.
I don't believe they're saying I wasn't in my right mind.
So she's saying, I had 9 drinks, but now she's bringing up the possibility that she wasn't in her right mind. Again, back to the cracked idea, back to the idea that she got so angry that she got out of her right mind and cracked up and lost control.
Well, they were saying you were intoxicated. Is it possible that you might have hit him unwittingly in your admittedly very large SUV?
No, not possible.
How is it now not possible when that night it was possible? And usually if there was something that happened or some way, something that has convinced her it's not possible, this would be the time to say it. You're on national television.
3 days after O'Keefe was found dead, investigators arrested Reed for manslaughter. She was eventually indicted on second-degree murder. Investigators reported they found fragments of broken glass on the rear bumper on Reed's vehicle, and that a broken cocktail glass was found by what appeared to be patches of blood near O'Keefe's body.
The victim, Mr. O'Keefe.
So that's interesting. That's interesting.
Is last observed on surveillance video with a cocktail glass in his right hand. Same arm that's injured, the same type of glass that is then recovered from the bumper of the defendant's car.
In court documents, the prosecution also claims that Reed's blood alcohol level could have been between 0.13 and
Oh, I'm mistaken. So they're saying, so they don't have it, but it could have been from the witnesses. So the witnesses could be wrong. It could have been much lower. Interesting. Thanks, Melissa, for the super chat. Boston News just has a commercial. There is now an investigation into Trooper Mike Proctor on this specific case. There's so much to this case. Interesting. Well, we'll wait. We'll wait for it all to come out. I think it's interesting that she's being charged with manslaughter, not something more serious.
0.29%.
Like for those following the Adelson case, like murder, right? It's a you know, what is it? Is it second degree murder? Or is it manslaughter?
Above the legal limit of 0.08.
Second degree murder. That's actually still pretty serious. I thought it was manslaughter for a second. Okay.
In addition, they say pieces of Reed's taillight were found on the scene the day O'Keefe's body was discovered. More fragments of that taillight were found the following week, according to Canton police reports, after the...
Oh, God. Oh, blessed. Sorry, guys. I'm really sorry. I got so into it. I just spaced out and hit the thing. My apologies.
Were found on the scene the day O'Keefe's body was discovered. More fragments of that taillight were found the following week, according to Canton police reports, after the snow melted, which revealed more at the scene. But Reed's attorney, Alan Jackson, has a different theory about how those fragments of taillight got there.
Those pieces of taillight were placed there after the fact.
You're saying evidence was planted.
The pieces of taillight were planted after the fact.
What does the defense believe actually happened?
So do they have any evidence to prove that? It's a great idea, but do they have any evidence to prove it? So when the state says, oh, he was seen with that glass, that's very compelling evidence. When the glass is found next to his body, exactly the glass he's pictured with, that's very compelling evidence, no? What does the defense have to prove that they planted it? Because it seems pretty logical that, I grew up in the country, and we used to have these big snowstorms. And we would find things in the spring, like, the windshield wipers where they would wipe off the frost of the windshield, shovels. Like, you find a lot of stuff when the snow melts. It's not it doesn't all have to be a conspiracy, but if they have some really compelling evidence of police planning stuff, I'd like to see it.
Happened to John after Karen dropped him off?
I think he walked into the house. I think he was confronted, was likely brought down to the basement. I think that confrontation got physical, and he was beaten. He was beaten to a point of unconsciousness.
Jackson argues that the autopsy photos of O'Keefe support his theory and not the prosecution's claim.
Looks like he's been in a fist fight and he's been beaten. He's got some defensive wound bruises on the backs of his hand. He's got this massive laceration on the back of his head, a big giant gash, about 2.5 inches, exactly lateral, going from left to right. 2 black eyes, cut over his right eye, cut over his nose.
Okay, so does it have to be either or? Could she have cracked up? It could have gotten physical, and then she hit him with her car? Could all two? Or is the state saying it's only a hit with the car did all that? What is the state's theory here?
This was a cover-up, that John was murdered inside that house. His body was placed outside.
But in a statement,
Well, how do they know that? I mean, I know that they presented to the court that someone did a search, and that my understanding is that there's this search for how long does it take to die in the cold from another phone, not hers. So this will be a really interesting trial if it comes to trial. I find her own words very not so believable, and her story not so believable.
to ABC News, the prosecution says there was no conspiracy or cover-up. Such claims have been systematically refuted by evidence submitted to Norfolk Superior Court. The prosecution also said that, according to O'Keefe's cell phone GPS records and 11 witness statements, O'Keefe never entered Albert's home, and that a medical examiner found no signs of Mr. O'Keefe being involved in any...
Why didn't she just go up to the house and knock if he didn't come out? Wouldn't that be the logical thing to do? If he's not answering the phone, if he goes in there, and what is she alleging the relationship is with the people inside the house that they'd want to kill him?
type of physical altercation or fight.
There was no evidence that Mr. O'Keefe was beaten and left for dead. There was no evidence of any defensive wounds.
ABC News reached out to attorneys for Brian Albert and Jennifer McCabe.
So they're saying that she absolutely couldn't. That's exactly from him hitting his head on the pavement and all those scratches. Do they have that right? They don't have that right. She might walk. What I don't understand is why she's so resistant to going to trial. She certainly has a lot of support. And a good lawyer. I would be dying to prove my innocence in court.
I did not hear back by the time of this broadcast. In a previous statement to the Boston Herald, McCabe's attorney said the whole scenario is baseless. Reed is scheduled to appear next in court again in September.
So that is that. And I just wanted to, you want to see, actually, I'm going to take a quick break and get back. We can watch some of the hearing. What time is it? Yeah, it's a quickie. I'm just going to take a quick break, pull up the hearing. I will be back in 36 seconds. Don't go anywhere. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Well, okay, so that went a lot quicker, meaning the interview with Karen Reed than I thought it would. So we have some time. I thought maybe we'd check out the hearing from yesterday.
February 26th. I first anticipated that today would be for all motions, but I did read the very detailed affidavit from defense counsel regarding dates and what we should cover. And so today, as you know, I changed some of the dates to accommodate you, I think there was some short trial dates you may have had or restitution dates. And so you did get the order on the new dates. So today is only for filing all Rule 17 motions and for the motion to dismiss under Odell and the motion for sanctions. So I don't remember if it were...
So if she's sure she didn't do it, who is she alleging did do it in the police department? She doesn't know. It's just one figure of the police, one guy in the police. And if she loved this guy, wouldn't she want that person to be convicted of this crime?
It was Mr. Jackson and Mr. Yannetti who last time said that I was operating from a blind spot because I didn't have the information that was disclosed to you folks from the U.S. Attorney's Office. So you were good enough to get me the entire packet, which I appreciate. I read it. I see now how the federal investigation began and when it began. I've also read the pleading. So the motion to dismiss, defendant's motion to dismiss is around 50 pages with attachments. The supplement is about 15 pages. The Commonwealth's opposition is about the same. The motion for sanctions is about 30 pages. There's no supplement, Mr. Yannetti?
There's no supplement.
Okay, and then the Commonwealth had about 25 pages, and then the Commonwealth supplement covered both motions, and the Commonwealth had originally probably hundreds of pages of exhibits. So I have read all of that, and I am mindful also, I keep coming back to the letter that was written to me on February 26th from the Deputy U.S. Attorney, who says, "We expect, of course, that the parties will disclose orally the materials in court only as necessary to further the proceedings." So I've read everything. I'm going to give each side 10 minutes, and we're going to start with the motion to dismiss. So, Mr. Jackson, I'll hear you. I think it would be particularly helpful if you were to focus on the exact prejudice to the defendant and how this all goes to the core of the Odell motion. And as you know, that's an awfully high bar.
So when you're first in court, it's like you're listening at, I think that when I had, Patty's Playhouse on, talking about the Adelson case, she said it really well. She described it really well, that there's no playback button. So it's such a different experience than watching it on TV or something where you can turn back and you really have to tune in your ear. And it's kind of like I don't know, it's a skill you have to develop when you're in court to really follow along. Everything goes by very, very quickly. And of course they're speaking legalese. So it's sort of like learning little bit of a new dialect, maybe, of the same language?
So go ahead.
Your Honor, I will try to edit my comments to stay within the 10-minute mark. It's very difficult to do that. I did not know that we were going to be under such incredible time constraints. As a matter of fact, I thought that the court said the last time we were in court, we had basically your words.
Yeah, all day. But that was when we had all the motions, but it's just these two motions
right,
today.
but they're big.
They're big.
Consistent with.
Why don't you go ahead and start? If you need additional time, tell me. But it would be important to focus your argument. Again, I'm mindful of what the U.S. Attorney said to me in that letter.
And I am as well. And that mindfulness suggests that my comments will be directed to that which is necessary to further the proceedings.
Okay.
Which means that.
Right ahead.
I'll start with the basic rule of Odell. We start with the postulate that any distortion of the evidence, that's where we start, any distortion of the evidence during the course of a grand jury proceeding impairs the integrity of the indictment, if there is an indictment, and pursuant to Odell, that requires dismissal. In this particular case, there were myriad examples, which I will.
Yeah, those grand juries are really interesting. You know, speaking of, it's Sunny Tanner sat on a grand jury in Florida. And I said to her, I asked her, how many times did you vote not to move forward? And she said, never. I thought, whoa. You would really hope all those cases are good cases, right?
Again, I'll edit. I was going to go through several, but I'll just touch on them very quickly.
Your memo, I have to say, your memo is very thorough and very helpful to me because you outline everything, and same in your supplement.
Thank you. The first point I want to discuss is what we believe is the failure to disclose Sergeant Michael Lank's personal lifelong relationship with some of the individuals, specifically the individual Chris Albert. There was a comment or an incident, I should say, that we referred to in our moving papers that dealt with Chris Albert and Sergeant Lank years ago.
So they're saying that, so Chris Albert is, I understand, the gentleman whose house it was in Canton. So they're saying there's relationships. So they're saying that they should have excused themselves, but from the investigation.
Long-standing, years-long relationship, and I'll close this loop in just a second, but if you'll allow me, that relationship goes all the way back to 2002 at least. And there was an incident in which Sergeant Lank and Chris Albert had gotten into what can easily be described as a bar fight. Chris Albert had gotten into a bar fight of some sort. Michael Lank walks out of the same bar or an adjacent bar. He had been drinking with his buddy Chris. He walks out, stumbles out, announces to the participants in this fight that he was, quote unquote, deputizing himself, and ultimately came to Chris Albert's aid. That was with the specific intent to assist an Albert in getting out of a legal jam, all the way back to 2002.
Wait. I want to go back. Jane's World reminds me of the case of the doctor's wife who found him cheating at a hotel and ran him over repeatedly in the circular drive. Remember? Yes. I do remember that case, Jane. That's an oldie. And thank you so much. Yeah, when I listen to Karen Reed, I could be turned the other way. I really could. I'm a trial junkie. So this is just my first impressions. And I tend to lean a little bit more towards the state. And I'm concerned about a movement to free her that's going around knocking on people's doors if what the state is saying is true and accusing people of murder. And that Karen Reed isn't calling off the dogs. That concerns me. That she thinks that behavior is okay and acceptable, as she accuses the police of this kind of really awful behavior. So But at the same time, we haven't seen we really haven't seen either the entire state's case, only in these, and I haven't read these filings. It's very different to just watch them very quickly. I watched this one, but I didn't watch all of the one before it. So I am not totally informed on this case. I'm just giving you, this is really just the beginning of what I hope will be more of a deeper look. I'm just trying to kind of tell you where I'm thinking as I'm watching this kind of true crime material and asking some questions that I don't think are being asked. So if she has a good case, I'll be the first to stand up and say my initial impressions were wrong.
The reason I bring that up, and by the way, both of the individuals involved, not Sergeant Lank, both of the other individuals involved were ultimately arrested by Sergeant Lank. That case went to trial, and both of the individuals were found not guilty of assault. And that's after Michael Lank engaged in fisticuffs with at least one of the men, to the degree that the Canton police officers had to pull him off of the...
So Melissa, is this a different guy? So you're saying Trooper, let me bring up your super chat. So you're saying Trooper Michael Proctor, was this one of these guys? I'll give you a chance. I know I'm on a little bit of a delay to catch up. Are these other people?
Individual.
So this is in your memo, and it also is exhibits C through E attached to your memo.
And the reason this comes to a head, and the conflict of interest comes to a head, is because Michael Lank ultimately was the first person to walk into Brian Albert's house. During the course of the grand jury, nobody elicited information from Michael Lank that he had a close personal relationship with the Alberts, that he had in years past come to the Alberts' aid. And yet he was the first person that came into the house. Even the grand jurors were stunned by this and the specific grand jurors asked Michael Lank and asked the Commonwealth, or through the Commonwealth of the witness, why didn't Brian Albert ever even come out of the house? And I think we have the answer. And the answer is because the Albert, specifically Brian Albert, was waiting on a friendly. And they got that friendly through Michael Lank. That was with...
The other thing that I'm thinking about as I'm watching this, and this is what I was thinking about yesterday, is what is the likelihood that there was a massive conspiracy, that the police went out and planted things in the snow, no one saw them do it, and that she knows all this happened. Not that I was driving away and maybe I had hit she's kind of vague about where, at least in that interview, vague about where she hit her or cracked her taillight. Are there going to be defense witnesses saying, I saw this happen? I saw police out there not uncovering this, but planning it? Or are they saying the minute they uncovered it, they were really planning it? Is that what they're saying? But what is if we're going to look at, so Occam's razors, when we have two equally likely theories, so it's already not an Occam's razor situation. I think obviously the much more likely theory is that she went out and that they had a fight, couples fight. She lost her mind and she hit him in anger. Or she was so drunk, she accidentally hit him. And then when she sobered up a bit, she went back and tried to find him. But this sort of searching thing doesn't make a lot of sense. So soon. You drop them off 2.5 hours later, you're panicked and searching. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, or the other theory is that he was killed in the house, drug out in the middle of the night, left to die in the snow. And the police officers would be comfortable doing that with their friend. And that, I don't know, I haven't heard any kind of reason why this would happen.
Held from the grand jury. Sergeant Lank is a longtime childhood friend of the Alberts. The Canton Police Department was conflicted off the case because...
Meaning she's already admitted that there were tensions in the relationship before this. But certainly, and hopefully at trial, they'll set up a whole history between the police department as to these kinds of tensions between O'Keefe and the people in the house. You'd have to sell it to a jury. But I just find her story very weird.
Of those personal and familial relationships that the Alberts have with Canton Police Department. And Sergeant Lank has a history of using his position as a police officer to shield the Alberts from criminal liability. That was never brought out. That's the kind of distortion that Odell talks about. Another broad example or a broad category that I want to discuss briefly deals with Trooper Michael.
Wait, so what exactly, how did he use his position to shield the Alberts, meaning the people in the house? All I've heard is that they were found not guilty of assault.
Proctor. The Commonwealth withheld from the grand jury clear and even more egregious conflicts of interest as they pertain to Michael Proctor. Sergeant Lank was aware of this irremediable conflict that Canton Police Department had and that he should have had with the Alberts. So
I've seen this argument a lot in Tolerant. There's a snow plow driver who said there was no body in the snow when he plowed that street during the night. So are we supposed to believe that he knows for sure that there was no body, or did he not see a body in the middle of the night when you're exhausted and you're in the middle of doing a heavy plow job that you might miss it?
what does he do? He calls in Massachusetts State Police. And who do they send but Michael Proctor? And that's like jumping from the frying pan into the fire. That's the same Michael Proctor who's also years-long close family friends with the Alberts. The Proctors have called the Alberts their, quote, second family. And to that point, now we have benefit of some hindsight. And
yeah, cops are friends. So what I haven't gotten is a motivation. I keep coming back to the same thing, but this is what I'm just going to be honest. This is what's going through my mind when I'm watching this argument. So because something is possible doesn't mean it's probable or that it happened. I'd like to see a little bit more evidence. Now, if that snowplow driver saw a lot of police out there doing some weird stuff or burying stuff or dragging out a body, that would be explosive evidence.
that's the federal investigation. We have been saying since September 16th, 2022, in lengthy motions that we filed before this court and filed with the Commonwealth, there is a conflict. You're not investigating the conflict. That conflict was never described to the grand jurors. And we've been rebuffed at every single turn. Newly uncovered text messages, but from the...
Okay, so Melissa, thank you very much. All 11 people leaving a party. Which part? Is it near the Alberts house? In the dark? Didn't see a body either. How obvious was it? I guess that's what we're going to see at trial, exactly the location, I hope, right? Don't we hope to see those pictures? Hold on. But you're talking about people who have had a night of drinking, you're in the dark. What are you paying attention to? And when it's that cold, you're just, I mean, at least when I'm leaving someone's house in the dark, I'm not looking around on the ground. I'm thinking about getting in a warm car or getting in a car and having it warm up as quickly as possible. But I would say that's a neutral fact for both sides. I think the defense I bring it up. Maybe it's a little bit more of a defense talking point that no one saw it, but how were they looking? Where were their location?
Feds revealed that on January 19th, 2022, think about that date, that's 10 days before the incident. January 19th, 2022, Michael Proctor texted his own family members discussing the specifics of having Julie Albert babysit for his toddler child. We should all let that sink in for a second.
So, yeah, I understand that.
There is a level of closeness that cannot be overstated. Michael Proctor is so connected to the Alberts that he was entrusting them, or willing to entrust the Alberts, to be caregivers for his toddler child. And it's not lost on anybody in this courtroom that for 2 years.
So what the defense is arguing is that it's impossible to trust the evidence because the people who investigated this case were too close to the people the state is alleging did this. So I think it's going to be really important, at least for this channel, to go back to the other hearing way back. I hope that's on tape, where they're talking about the medical examination of the body to prove that he was hit by a car. But if he wasn't hit, I mean, isn't it a little bit like OJ and the glass? Isn't it a little bit coincidental that the person that they're alleging did this also had a broken taillight that night? I mean, or a cracked taillight? It's really hard because, and yeah.
Years, the Commonwealth has been denying it and still denies it in their opposition paperwork. They still say, well, there's nothing to see here. It's Michael Proctor's sister who really is friends with Julie Albert, and that's not a big deal. Everybody looked the other way. As a matter of fact, Ms. McLaughlin wrote the following in her opposition. Trooper Proctor's supposed close and personal relationship with the Alberts is, quote, entirely unfounded and a desperate creation of the defense, a desperate creation of ours. She says we created this. But now we have the benefit of the federal investigation. And the Commonwealth finds itself in that very unenviable position of having to eat some very distasteful words, because we didn't create anything. And there's more.
So Ring video, thanks Rebecca. Ring video shows she tracked taillight at 5 a.m. at John's house. So she's looking for him at 5 a.m. Interesting. I hope that'll be, has anybody seen that? Is that up on YouTube? That'd be fun to look at.
On February 1st, 2022, 3 days after John O'Keefe was killed, there was another text message. In this one, Michael Proctor's sister texts Michael Proctor very specifically and writes the following, quote, just saw Julie, and Julie said when all this is over, she wants to give you, Michael Proctor, a thank you gift. Michael Proctor didn't respond with, that's inappropriate, these are witnesses, these are potential suspects, please tell her don't ever do that again, don't ever suggest an exchange of gifts again, that would be inappropriate. I'm gonna go write a report, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Lally, and Mr. Lally's gonna turn that information over to the defense and to the court. No, that's what he should have done. What he did do is he responded, get Elizabeth one, his wife. In other words, get the gift from my wife, it'll be a little less obvious. So now we have the lead investigator from Massachusetts State Police literally discussing the exchange of gifts between the Albert family on the one hand and the Proctor family on the other hand.
Was there blood on her vehicle? And if that's true, that brings up a really interesting point, right? So the state presents a theory. Now, that theory doesn't have to be correct. The jury can create their own theory of what happened. And that could include a physical fight and a hitting with the car. And not a broken taillight there, right? But it's really hard to say what's Yeah, it's going to be an interesting trial. Does anyone know if they've gotten a trial date yet?
As a thank you, their words, for helping the Alberts out of a jam. And if you looked up quid pro quo in the dictionary, you would find this set of text messages. 2 years later, to the day, on February 1st, 2024. Now let's fast forward 2 years later. Now
Next month, April. Interesting. So we have two really interesting trials. Caitlin Markham. That's a really a case that fascinates me. And I don't know if that's going to be broadcast. And this is going to, I would think that this would take fire because it's such an interesting case. And I know that the DA in charge of this case just retired in shame. So
Michael Proctor finds himself on the witness stand in front of a federal grand jury, which we just found out about. That grand jury was tasked with a singular commission, and that was investigating crimes of public corruption by law enforcement in relation to this case. And during that testimony, he was confronted with these and myriad other.
Okay, that's a definite bad fact. That's a very bad fact. Jack Joe 15 says, thank you very much for the super chat. His DNA was on her taillight. Bad fact. Bad fact for the defense there.
Other examples of evidence of his close ties to the Albert family. And he admitted to an AUSA under very intense questioning that not only does he know the Alberts, and does he socialize with them, does he drink with them, does he go to pool parties with them, but he told his partner, Yuri Butnik.
Okay. My boyfriend is running in and saying, nope, it's not blood, it's DNA. It's not. And is it DNA that lights up under luminol, or is it just DNA? That's two very different things. You could get, he's saying you could get DNA from washing the car, opening the trunk. I think he's joining the Free Karen Reed movement. I think I see him. He said I didn't say that. Glass on bumper is a lie, Sherry says. Interesting. So was it tested for luminol? Did the car just did it light up? Let me know about if you know if it was tested for luminol, because that's something, speaking of Amanda Knox, that they don't talk about, which is Amanda Knox's DNA was mixed with Meredith Kircher's DNA in multiple places, not the room, in the room of the staged break-in. And so if you don't know anything about the Amanda Knox case, it was determined by the Supreme Court. The decision that let her go determined that Amanda Knox was at the scene of the crime and watched Meredith Kircher's blood off her hands and feet. And in roommate Philomena's room, there's Amanda Knox's DNA and Meredith Kircher's DNA in multiple places that is mixed together that lights up under luminol. Now, supporters of Amanda Knox will say that she had rubbed root vegetables on her feet, but there's no other roommate that has that kind of mixed DNA and to have root vegetables, they do light up under luminol, but not in that intense way that blood does. So so be interesting to hear about the DNA, because like I've been saying about the Innocence Project, when, their favorite thing to do is find some kind of incomplete DNA and declare innocence. And for example, think about the Adelson case. If money was recovered and say Charlie or Katie's DNA wasn't found on it, they'd be like, see, innocent, or some kind of incomplete DNA left on it. But thanks to Donna washing the money, that may never be the case. I think that the money, so many other evidences that's so damning. It's not a DNA case, but that's one of the favorite things to do, is turn a case that's really not a DNA case into a DNA.
All of this before Yuri Buchnick testified at the grand jury and before he and Buchnick actually interviewed Chris Albert. Why does that mean something? Why does that mean something to the court and to this argument? Because when Yuri Buchnick testified before the state court grand jury, he testified that, quote,
I mean, if I were a defense attorney in this, I'd say DNA on the taillight. He's not walking steady. He's destined to brush up against it. But the bad fact about that is it's the winter where you're all bundled up, right? So it's less likely, but because DNA doesn't have any timestamp, we don't know. There's no date that it could be left there. So, I mean, be very interesting to know what kind of tests they did on it.
Following formal introductions, end quote, Julie Albert and Chris Albert provided their phone numbers. Following formal introductions. That was a clear deceit on the grand jurors. Yuri Buchnick knew, as did Michael Proctor. They didn't need formal introductions. Michael Proctor was considering having Julie Albert babysit his kid 10 days ago. Actually, at that time, 13 days ago. That left the grand jury with the intentional false impression that these people literally do not know each other. They've never been in contact. They're complete strangers. That was a lie. That was a concerted effort to hide that relationship and to hide the conflict of interest. And the grand jurors were fooled. They were left with the impression, Michael Proctor, Yuri Buchnick, they don't know these.
Well, I mean, my brother's friends. I'm trying to think if I babysat for my brother's friends, would that make me so loyal that I'd cover up a murder? I mean, you're talking about losing. I mean, if you got caught up in this conspiracy, you'd lose your job, your image. I mean, it's a lot to risk. I just haven't heard a motivation yet. And these are the kind of things that defense attorneys do, throw out these things just to like make you doubt. But really what the judge has to evaluate is, was Karen Reed's right to a fair trial eroded because of these relationships? And he's argued that these relationships were some kind of covered up in with some kind of bad intent, but without really kind of proving it. I haven't heard any. Maybe he'll go on to prove it. I think he'd be better off arguing, look, we cannot trust the evidence because of this investigation and because of these relationships. Instead of saying it was covered up, they knew it all along and they covered it up. I don't find that very convincing. I'm just being honest.
Folks, they're completely neutral, independent investigators, and nothing could be further from the truth. And the revelation of this evidence culminated in front of that same grand jury on February 1st, 2024. Under additional intense questioning by the Assistant United States Attorney, Proctor was caught in his own web of deceit and testified as follows, quote, this is the AUSA talking, or asking the question. So obviously we're asking questions about your relationship with Julie Albert, with Chris Albert, and with Colin Albert. Do you understand that? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and you're saying that you're minimizing, quote, minimizing your relationship to the grand jury, correct? Answer, yes. He finally,
Hey, Sonny Tanner, were your ears burning? I was just talking about you sitting on a grand jury and how you voted to indict every single time. I found that a little, they were all slam dunk cases. It'd be interesting to see how they turned out in trial. Did you ever follow up on that? I'd love to know. Because at least in New York with our federal trials, we have some kind of crazy rate of conviction. So if we indict someone on a federal case here, I think it's 93% of the time the state wins.
The scrutiny.
And Larry Ray, Ghislaine, every trial that I've attended has been a federal case. So Larry Ray, Ghislaine Maxwell, and of course the NXIVM trial was a federal trial. And they've always had to especially in the Larry Ray case, he had the only case that I saw where they had a court-appointed defense attorneys. Those were the best defense attorneys, best defense I've ever seen. Greatest trial I've ever been to was the Larry Ray trial, which if you don't know about it, it's my alma mater, Sarah Lawrence College. It enrages me to talk about, but he went, so Larry Ray was a lifelong criminal. His daughter went to the school. He went directly from prison to his daughter's college housing on campus. So they have these college campus. It's like a condo where a group of friends all get together called Sloanham Woods, and you petition for a house together and you share a kitchen, and it's like a house. You have a couple bathrooms and a kitchen, and he lived there for 6 months. And he could not be confused, this paunchy middle-aged guy, bald middle-aged guy. And he started a cult and really exploited financially in every other way. It's much worse. It's one of the more amazing stories. And the Hulu documentary does not tell a third of the story. The Hulu documentary, to its credit, really delved into the victims, but because I think they wanted so much an interview. I'm sorry, guys, I'll get back to this, with his Ghislaine Maxwell, Isabella Pollock, who eventually got convicted. She pled out and got convicted. That I think they really downplayed a lot of that story. I'd really love to write a book about the real story of that case. It's not in the documentary, and it's really hasn't been. It's so wild.
Of a federal grand jury admitted that he had been lying about his relationship to the Alberts, which means he lied to the grand jury, which means the evidence was distorted in front of the grand jury. And that is the burden that Odell requires.
All right, so your time is up, which includes me interjecting. Do you want 5 more minutes?
If I could implore the court.
I'd like you to sort of get to the questions I asked as well. All right, I know you're reciting the evidence that I've read, but so I'll give you 5 more minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to shift gears to another example, or another series of examples of evidence that was distorted before the grand jury. And that deals with...
So I keep getting the nagging feeling that this is more for the public and to whip up public support for Karen Read than it is for the judge.
The use of, or the insinuation of Kevin Albert, yet another Albert, at the behest of Michael Proctor. Kevin Albert is a sworn Canton police officer. On day one, the Canton Police Department was completely recused off the case, in no small part because of Kevin Albert and the fact that John O'Keefe's body was found on Kevin Albert's brother's lawn. Yet the evidence that has been disclosed by the federal investigation, which we were not privy to, is that Michael Proctor actually utilized Kevin Albert's services to coordinate with the very witnesses who should have been potentially suspects and certainly should not have been subject to coordination by an Albert, when that's the very person.
So Gail, you bring up a good point, Gail. So where this becomes a non-neutral fact. So this is, I would put this in not a great fact for either party, right? So if they haven't done luminol testing on the SUV, right? And I don't know anything about hitting people with cars, whether blood would go on the SUV if you hit someone. And I haven't heard the state's theory of how exactly this happened, but they lived together. So what? So Gail's saying blood on Reed's SUV. I've not heard that. I heard DNA, but they lived together. So what? If the state can prove that she got her car washed, do you know what I mean? Sometime before this, how likely is it in the winter to just be rubbing yourself up against the car? Is it possible, or is it possible but probable? You'd have to have a lot of other things to make that a really important fact for the state.
On whose lawn John O'Keefe, or his brother's lawn, John O'Keefe was found. I want to turn to at least one more situation in my remaining minute or so, given the fact that this is curtailed. And this is not in our papers, but obviously it's a complete and probably the most obvious distortion of the facts.
Is my internet getting wacky? Because I'm not seeing the chat come up, and I'm seeing that oh no, it's connected. All right. Let me know if it gets wacky.
The Commonwealth suppressed one of the most obvious pieces of exculpatory evidence in the entire case, and that was a piece of evidence that they know torpedoes their entire case and their theory of this case, and that's Jennifer McCabe's Google search at 2:27 a.m., how long to die in cold. They had her phone at the time of the grand jury. They had her complete extraction of that phone at the time of the grand jury. They had a Celebrite report, Your Honor, at the time of the grand jury, and yet they did not present this evidence. They claim, oh, well, we didn't have the right version of the Celebrite software. That's on them.
Well, that's possible. That doesn't mean that shadowy things happened. Things happen when you don't have that version. Maybe they felt that they had enough evidence for a grand jury to indict. That's not a great argument that they're hiding stuff.
Them. That's not our fault. Certainly not Miss Reed's fault. That's their fault. Get the right software. If you're going to bring this case, do it the right way. They say their argument is, well, we just didn't have the right software, so we didn't have the information. That's not true. They did have the information. It was sitting in her phone. They just didn't do their job in extracting. And should the Commonwealth once again stand up in some sort of desperate pitch to dispute that time and this critical evidence, the court should note the following. Not only does the Celebrite report confirm the search and the time of that search, not only do our experts confirm the search and the time of that search, but now a Quantico-trained special agent with the FBI's Regional Computer Forensic Lab, in other words, the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, also specifically confirms that that search was made on Jennifer McCabe's phone, and it was made on or before.
This smiling and this enjoying the spectacle of her defense, or the argument of her defense, when her defense is really getting theatrical. And I'm not criticizing him for getting theatrical. It certainly makes it interesting. But this concerns me. Because whatever happened, there's a dead man at the case, John O'Keefe is not coming back. And if I were innocent, I'd be going through hell. I wouldn't be sitting there smiling. Seems like a bit of duper's delight to me, but let's listen on. I could flip the other way.
2:27 and 40 seconds a.m. on January 29th, 2022. That fact, Your Honor, is no longer open for debate. And none of that was presented before the grand jury. I'll conclude by...
Okay, welcome to my world. This is like my boyfriend are basically, we're on opposite ends in so many different political opinions. We fight all day long. long about things. He just came in going, maybe she's happy that her story is being told. Maybe this smile is relief that finally the truth is coming out. Yeah, my answer to that is that's a great argument if you lived on Mars and not planet Earth. I just don't find it normal within the normal realm of human behavior, the spectrum. So it's a spectrum, right? Of what we come to expect at a hearing like this. And this is way off the charts into weird territory for me. And I noticed that same kind of smile in the opening credit from the news story. She seems to really love the attention and loves the theatrics of it. Really reminds me a little bit of the musical Chicago, like Velma Kelly or something. Just really enjoying getting over on the court.
Saying any one of these examples, and I didn't touch on all of them, but any one of these examples, the gift giving, the babysitting, the telephone extraction, the Google search at 2:27 in the morning, all of these, any one of these would be enough to dismiss the charges as they sit here today. But the cumulative effect of this deception and all of it, this distortion in front of the grand jury, is too much for the court to ignore. The simple fact, Your Honor, is the presentation before by the Commonwealth before the grand jury in the state court action, it just wasn't fair. That's the easiest way to say it. It just didn't give Miss Reed a fair shot. It just didn't. That presentation was packed with lies, known lies by the investigators, and the omissions and the manipulations and deceit by the very people that are supposed to be the ones that we in the community can trust. The ones that are supposed to protect our interests, and the law does not allow this sort of conduct to go unchecked. When the remedy when this sort of travesty of justice occurs is established by this state's Supreme Judicial Court, and that is dismissal of the indictment in its entirety. And it is not enough, and I'll be surprised if I don't hear it today, but something suggests, based on the moving papers that we just got from Ms. McLaughlin and Mr. Lally, are, well, Your Honor, we didn't know. We didn't know about the text messages. We didn't know about Proctor. We didn't know about Lank. All that stuff was revealed through the federal grand jury. It doesn't matter that Ms. McLaughlin individually didn't know, or Mr. Lally can say, I claim ignorance, I didn't know either. It's enough that an arm of their institution, law enforcement, they knew. And that was their job to tell the truth. That was their job not to fool or distort the Commonwealth. I'm sorry, the grand jurors. With that, Your Honor, thank you for the time, and I'll submit.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lally, we're going to start with 10 minutes. If you need more, you need to tell me.
Sure.
And thank you, Your Honor. No, I think 10 minutes should be fine. I know the court has taken painstaking detail to go through all the material that's submitted, so I'll be as brief as I can. Essentially, the defendant, as the court is aware, doesn't challenge the grand jury presentation on the McCarthy grounds or probable cause standard. Defendant motions challenges under Odell. Odell essentially states dismissal of an indictment on impairment of the grand jury proceedings requires proof of 3 elements, as the court is well aware. 1, that the Commonwealth knowingly or recklessly presented false or deceptive evidence to the grand jury. Secondly, that the evidence was presented for the purpose of obtaining an indictment. And 3, that the evidence probably influenced the grand jury's decision to indict.
Okay, so knowingly presented false evidence.
None of which I would submit the defendant has met their burden with reference to any of those 3 elements. Just addressing sort of the overarching themes of the defendant's motion. The defendant challenges, as he just stated, the testimony of Canton Police Sergeant Lank and his testimony attributing statements to the defendant that were made in the aftermath of Mr. O'Keefe's body being discovered in a purported deception of Sergeant Lank's relationship with the Albert family. Trooper Proctor's purported false and deceptive statements throughout the course of his testimony, and the Commonwealth's failure to elicit a purported inconsistent statement of Christopher Albert and the Commonwealth's failure to impeach Julie Albert's testimony. Your Honor, simply put, none of these issues or stated malfeasance actually occurred before this grand jury. As it relates to Sergeant Lank, I mean, we're talking about what the defendant submits as an attachment is an incident from almost 20 years ago, which doesn't involve anyone who was at the house at 34 Fairview Road on the night when Mr. O'Keefe died. The statements that Sergeant Lank...
So it sounds good, right? But he's saying, look, these guys, it's a statement that didn't relate to anyone in the house that night. Shout out. Who else here is left-handed? I love when there's a left-handed prosecutor. Shout out to all the lefties out there.
Is attributing to the defendant were not only testified to by Sergeant Lank, and they're testified not in a deceptive manner. They're testified to by Sergeant Lank in the sense of he indicated he spoke to officers who had preceded his arrival. All of those officers also testified before the grand jury. All of those members who received statements from the defendant essentially indicating that she did it, that doesn't just come from one source. That comes from at least 5 different witnesses, 3 of them paramedics with a...
Either they fall flat or they reveal something. But what he's saying is that everybody's okay with totally committing a murder. All these witnesses, all these cross-examinations are going to be very important of these witnesses.
And the fire department. Counsel posits the question of why didn't Brian Albert come out of the house? No one did. Not only out of that house, but any house. It's clearly visible in the grand jury exhibits. You have the cruiser camera footage from Officer Saraf, as far as no one else in the neighborhood.
So that's a little hard if you're going to plant a body. So I guess her point is that because the people at the party didn't see it and the snowplow person didn't see it, they're all lying and that it was all done at a different time, right? That's how it's got to be. Clever defense. I mean, but it's going to be really hard. It's going to be down to that testimony of the people inside the house who saw it happen. And said, we never left. So that's an important ring. I guess they have Ring camera. Is that what they have?
Coming out of the house, as well as testimony from a number of different witnesses that were there and present on that morning in the dark, in a blizzard at the time that Mr. O'Keefe is found. Counsel wants to say that the Commonwealth is asking.
So I'm wondering if people have been around a blizzard, because it's definitely something that, why wouldn't they just plant the body somewhere else? I mean, it's definitely something you don't want to be walking around in at any time of the day or night, planting someone's body that kind of cold and snow, and also just the tracks that it leaves.
Or everybody to sort of look the other way when it comes to these things. What I would submit is that's exactly what the defendant is doing. Look the other way, defense by obfuscation. It's essentially, it's a 3-card Monte trick, card trick on the corner on the side. Look at all of this, look at this relationship, look at that relationship, conflating these relationships, sort of the distortion that I would say between what exists in social media realm and what exists in reality. That if you know someone, that automatically means that you're best friends with them, every single one of their siblings, every single person that they've ever met or socialized with. One social interaction, transforms into a long-standing 20-year relationship, all of those things. And what the defense is obvious.
Right, because when I was a babysitter, I babysit a lot of people that I knew almost, that were friends of my parents' friends. And you're in the babysitting game as a young person, you're looking to pick up as many babysitting gigs as you can. It sounds really good, like, oh, babysit. Well, they'd have to trust you with your kids. Word of mouth goes a long way on that.
Skating from is the overwhelming evidence that was presented to this grand jury from a multitude of sources, 42 separate witnesses, 56 exhibits, over 1,400 pages of transcript, which clearly demonstrate and indicate that the defendant, Karen Reed, killed John O'Keefe. But they don't want you to look at that. They want you to look at who texted who when and what they said and what was asked and what was promised.
What concerns me is the lack of real feeling coming from Karen Reed. I get a lot of superficial, like a lot of charisma, a lot of confidence, but not a lot of no depth of feeling. And if this is a man she lived with and loved, it makes me think that she's more the kind of woman who is capable of doing something like this. This is a pretty callous and cruel act. And granted, she was, and also the fact that she was drinking, I guess the state's going to argue this, that her true nature came out. She was less in control of her dark side or her shadow side. But look at that face. Does that say I'm angry? And I don't see anger at being falsely accused. And I don't understand why she's so sure she knows what happened, exactly what happened. That they're all in on it. It was a cover up. They did it. I would be like, I don't know what happened. All I can tell you is what I did that night. And yes, I was drinking, but I wasn't blacked out. And I'm also, I'm not a drinker. So never been blacked out or that drunk. I think I've been that drunk once in my life in college, and I got so sick I never wanted to do it again.
In reviewing the materials provided by the U.S. Attorney's Office, a couple things that I would note is, number one, they have no idea how much of a percentage of the totality of the federal materials we have. I don't know if we have 5%, 50%, 90%. I have no idea. The other part that's confounding is that it appears that these materials or materials from the state prosecution were provided to the U.S. Attorney's Office by Mr. Yannetti or by the defendant or by defense counsel. And again, what I don't know is how much of a percentage of the total discovery from the state case was actually given and provided to.
Yes, that really is my boyfriend in the chat. So if you think it's, wait, hold on one second. If you think it's someone else.
Well, think again.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan Crawford.
The U.S. Attorney's Office in which to conduct their investigation. But it's clear from the investigation that they extensively investigated the facts and circumstances that led to Mr. O'Keefe's death. In sum, what I would submit, just as Ms. McLaughlin stated on the last date, that these materials are largely consistent with the Commonwealth's theory of the case. There is no suggestion of a third-party culprit, no suggestion of cover-up of evidence, no suggestion from the 13 civilians witnesses.
Yeah, Shari, Davis, thank you so much for real Channel 9. Yeah, he came in here and asked me if he could, if he could come in there. I said yes. That's really him. That's really he, I think, is actually the correct way. But thank you, Shari. Thanks for the super chat. So we have a definite difference in charisma between the defense attorney and the prosecutor here, but let me pay more attention to what he's saying.
Testimony that we've received, or transcripts of that testimony, all of them confirm that Mr. O'Keefe never entered 34 Fairview Road. All of it was absolutely no animosity between the individuals at the Waterfall Bar or at 34 Fairview residence. There was no fight. There was no dog attack. There was no eyewitness to the circumstances that led to Mr. O'Keefe's death. Witnesses also testified consistent. A year later, they testified in the state grand jury in the spring of 2022, largely in the spring of 2022, and then largely in the spring of 2023 before the federal grand jury. And their testimonies are largely consistent with the defendants making declarative statements that she did it, not a question mark at the end, but clear definitive statements on scene, that she had discussed the damage to her taillight prior to leaving Mr. O'Keefe's home on the morning of January 29th. You have a number of different statements that were alluded to by Mr. Jackson in regard to texts between from Trooper Proctor's phone. Of note, there are no text messages between Trooper Proctor's phone and Julie Albert's phone, except for two no-content text messages, one from June 21st, 2020, and one from September 1st of 2020. There is a discussion between Trooper Proctor and his sister because Julie Albert had provided child care in a pinch on several occasions for Trooper Proctor's sister. Trooper Proctor also testified that Julie Albert never did that for him, never watched his kids, never had looked after his children. That essentially never happened.
So they're saying, well, how are they going to all get together and do this or whatever, cover it up, I guess, without communication? They're saying great relationships, but it's not born out in the text.
Lastly, get to the Google search, and I would agree with counsel in the sense that it's really no longer open for debate, but I'm not really sure why we're still even talking about this or why this is still a topic that they're pushing. Essentially, what we have is yes, what counsel mentions is there is one expert who was given two extractions, presumably provided by defense counsel, that indicates from that particular FBI expert that the searches were done at 2-something in the morning. What counsel neglects to sort of raise and stress with the court is that there's a separate, and I forget exactly what it stands for, but an RCFL analysis of the phone in which through both Axiom and through Celebrite, and the conclusion of that expert is that the searches occurred when Ms. McCabe testified they occurred because the defendant asked her to conduct those searches at 6:23 and 6:24 in the morning. Really, the argument stops at the point of it's not, we didn't do our job to get the Celebrite version that shows that information did not exist at the time of the grand jury. So I'm not really sure how the Commonwealth is supposed to.
Right. So it's like this Celebrite technology or this version of Celebrite didn't exist at the time of the grand jury. How are you going to use something that doesn't exist?
Run something through a Celebrite version that isn't in existence at the time the grand jury is conducted. It's a subsequent version in which their expert, Mr. Green, finds these purported search without looking at the cache files, without looking at the DB list, without looking at the SQLite database, without looking at the wall file, all of which was done not only by Trooper Garino, an independent expert named Jessica Hyde, which counsel has all of those, as well as the senior technical analyst from Cellbite itself, a man named Mr. Whiffen. Counsel's had this report for months at this point. And essentially, Mr. Whiffen,
My apologies. So it's going to be a battle of the experts as to how this plays out between the defense experts. So the defense says they have one Cellbrite expert, and the prosecution is saying that they have 5 experts around this cell phone data evidence. And each side is going to be asking each expert how much they're getting paid in an effort to try to convince the jury that they are saying basically that you'll say anything that the state wants you to say for money, and the defense will be, the defense witness will be asked the same kind of thing, or they'll try to prove the same kind of thing with the defense witness. But when you have 5 people all saying the same thing, different kinds of witnesses, and only one saying something different, the defense is at a little bit of disadvantage. If that's true, we haven't seen, this has not come to trial yet. This is going to be a really interesting trial.
is essentially the person who creates the software that all of these experts are using. And his definitive opinion indicated in his report is that Ms. McCabe conducted those searches at 6:23 and 6:24 in the morning. So I would agree with counsel that it's really no longer up for debate. I think we just disagree as to the conclusions of that. But based on the totality of the evidence and what I would submit as the overwhelming evidence that was presented to this grand jury, all of these sort of individual parsing of stated malfeasance simply doesn't even come close to sustaining the burden under Odell. And for that reason, I would ask that the court deny the motion to dismiss.
Okay.
So is the evidence presented to the grand jury available? And if it is, can someone send it to me? My email is robertaglass23@gmail.com. I'd like to read that. Or is the grand jury proceeding, or is that all private? And if that's private, that's, if that's been not released, then that's going to be something that obviously the defense is going to say it's a cover up and they're not releasing it because it's so funny.
You want a few minutes, Mr. Jackson, to respond?
Very briefly.
Okay.
First of all, it's always interesting to hear an argument that suggests there's nothing to see here. That's exactly what Mr. Lally did yet again. He said, look the other way, look the other way. Oh, it's the defense that wants you to look the other way. We don't want you to look the other way, Your Honor. We want you to look directly at the evidence of the compromised relationships that Trooper Proctor had and hid. That's what we want the court to look at. He suggests, oh, well, there's just a couple of text messages. It's no big deal. The fact is, Your Honor, she really hit him. She really hit him with the car. Let's remember, she really hit him. And these text messages, they mean nothing. We're talking about the integrity of a sitting grand jury and the presentation before that grand jury.
So what I'm thinking about listening to this argument, and I think the state did a pretty good job of diffusing this argument about all these crazy relationships, is I'm thinking, why does Reed want this in the arena of PR, interviews, social media, and does she not want this to go to trial, where people are under oath, under threat of perjury, where there are rules of evidence? I think that's a real negative for her, at least in my view. I would be dying to go to court.
What Mr. Lally now has in his possession, but he didn't mention, now that he says, oh, well, she killed him. Let's just get on with it. She killed him. He's already tried and convicted her in his mind and tried to do it in this courtroom. It doesn't quite work that way. Now Mr. Lally has in his possession another thing from the feds that we didn't have access to. The federal investigators hired, independent of us, we had no idea, and independent of the Commonwealth, hired a professional reconstructionist, 3 PhDs, to look into exactly this issue. did Karen Reed's car, did her SUV make contact with John O'Keefe? And their conclusion to a person was his injuries were inconsistent with the damage on the car. The damage on the car was inconsistent with having made contact with John O'Keefe's body. In other words, the car didn't hit him.
So is he saying that the prosecution's experts are saying that the car didn't hit him, or are these defense experts? I'm confused.
And he wasn't hit by the car. Period. Full stop. That's their independent expert, not ours, not somebody on our payroll.
So that's one of the 5 experts says that he wasn't hit by the car? And they have another theory of how it happened?
Like Mr. Whiffen, or one of their experts, or Trooper Guarino, who's an arm of the agency. This is an independent federal government witness, or series of witnesses, who say unequivocally, that car did not hit John O'Keefe, and John O'Keefe was not hit by that car. But he didn't mention that. Second, he argued that the texts were not, these aren't texts between Julie Albert and Michael Proctor. These are texts between his family members. And then he mentions these 2 texts that had no content. What are the chances that Michael Proctor sent Julie Albert texts with no content? Your Honor, it's not that they didn't have content.
And why isn't she more enraged when they said, you said I hit him? And she's saying, it was preceded. That's the way she said. It was preceded with a did. No, I would have said, no, that's not what I said. I was misquoted. No. It's like she's managing it. It makes me think that she did say I hit him. Remember, she had a lot to drink. It loosens the lips. And she's telling her girlfriends about that she broke her taillight, and then she's not sure she broke. I mean, it's her own words, really, more than this argument that I find very. I mean, it's such a good example of why you don't give these kind of interviews. Because she talked herself into me feeling that she's guilty before I've ever seen any real evidence. It's so much better to just maintain your right, to maintain your silence, not go out into the media. But there is some kind of need to be center stage and enjoyment of this. But I don't see any real anger. I would be so angry if I was wrongfully accused of something. And she doesn't find that this is defaming her character in any way. She seems to be, by her lack of anger, seems to be telling us that she might be capable of something like this.
So that it couldn't be recovered, which sometimes happens. But we do have evidence that they were, in fact, in communication with each other as early as 2020. And with regard to the 2:27 a.m. search, it's not a 3-card Monty. It's not a shell game or whatever other fanciful thing Mr. Lally wants to suggest that it is, as he tap dances his way around this. He says that our expert, Rick Green, didn't look at the SQLite database. Yeah, Mr. Lally, reread his report. Yes, he did. He didn't look at the wall file. Yeah, Mr. Lally, reread his report. Yes, he in fact did. And he's the one that found the 2:27 a.m. search. And with regard to the Regional Computer Forensics Lab, that's the definition he couldn't remember. What they actually said was, because Mr. Lally got this wrong too, what they actually said was, yes, there was a 623 and a 6.
Roberta, I'm sorry. I got to disagree a little about your conjecture about this woman because, you know, she's probably under a lot of stress. Yes, she's been wrongfully convicted.
She hasn't been convicted. She's
or
just been accused.
she's worried that or whatever. You don't know how, you know, people react differently in all kinds of situations is what I'm saying. You can't really, I don't know. I'm worried that you would prejudge. That's all. I
am prejudging. I'm telling you exactly. I am prejudging with an open. I'm just telling you where I'm leaning.
Right. I hear you.
I find that concerning. I find I find you're getting a glimpse into what goes on every day in my house. I'm finding it concerning. I'm telling you how I really feel. Wait.
We argue about this all the time because Roberta's got a great instinct. And so since she's right so often, she thinks she's right 100% of the time. So I'm just saying, don't prejudge. But,
I'm not.
That's all.
I'm just
That's
telling
all.
you how I'm feeling.
Okay. Coolly.
That's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling watching this. I'm feeling like this does not look like someone who's grieving over their partner and angry that they're wrongfully accused and angry at the system and angry that they're going through this. I'm looking at someone who seems to enjoy being the center of attention. And I find that the whole thing around her taillight and the cracked taillight very weird. I mean, how do you say, I knew I did something to it, but I didn't look? How, when you hit your car, you don't look? What do you say?
Jeez, are we... Well, God, you got me on the spot. I just look, okay, she's a pretty girl. She likes being in the spotlight. A woman, I'm sorry. And I don't know, maybe that she's used to that. Maybe she's just enjoying being in the spotlight, especially when she's got a defense attorney making what, in my opinion, a pretty good case.
You think it's a good case?
I don't know enough yet about it. I think he made a good case. I haven't made a decision about it yet. Though.
All right. I'm just, all right, there you got it. You got a little glimpse into what goes on behind the scenes in between playing clips and stuff. We go back and forth all the time. We're really like very, very different in almost every way and see things very differently. So I'm just telling you how I feel from living on planet Earth and dealing with other people, that I find her, very, very tough, very unempathetic, and very unconcerned with the fact that her boyfriend is dead. I don't see the real, I don't even see defiance. I see just joy and joy and soaking up the attention. And I think her story is not specific enough for me. And obviously she was drinking, so she's at a disadvantage there, but I will go in with an open mind, but I would not be a good juror in this. The interview, I don't think did her any favors. And I find some of her, the guy leading her campaign very concerning. The fact that if I were in this position and someone was accusing random people and tampering with intimidating witnesses, I would be calling off the dogs, saying, guys, everybody chill out. We have the truth on our side. That's something I don't hear from her. I hear her sort of accusing everyone else.
24 search. And there was a 2:27 a.m. search as well. All three of those searches existed in the phone, Jennifer McCabe's phone, and it's not up for debate. That wasn't presented to the grand jury. The information that we've been talking about today wasn't presented to the grand jury. We're talking about the integrity of a proceeding. He doesn't get to convict my client by standing up here and pounding the table and saying, oh, she did it, she hit him. So let's just all get on with it and deny this motion. We're talking about the integrity of what is the foundation of Massachusetts judicial system. And that integrity was...
That's a good argument. That's a much better argument, but I haven't seen anything in these relationships if what the prosecution is saying is true that erodes her right to a free trial. This is a better argument, I think, right here than the actual facts, the basis of this argument. The argument is better on the surface until you look underneath the surface and see what he's basing it on. It's really important that we do things correctly and that we have integrity in these investigations. But I haven't been convinced that any of these relationships or any kind of motivation to do this But I see a lot of motivation on her part to do this. Drinking, the relationship was strained, and there's a need to be in control and to terrorize just by the way that she is not calling off her own campaign, her own people in her own campaign. Why isn't she saying, we're not doing this, we're not doing it? I don't want a campaign connected to my name going about things this way. It's fine to be in front of the courthouse with signs, but when you're involving yourself in the investigation and knocking on people's doors, you've crossed a line. Why isn't she doing that? That concerns me, and that erodes her right to a fair trial, her own rights. But it's like she and she's asking to dismiss this right away. She should be dying for all this to be exposed in court, because that this trial's got to be broadcast.
Compromised, that integrity was impaired, and it demands that justice be done, and that justice is in the hands of this court. We ask this court to do what the evidence dictates, do what the law dictates, and that is dismiss this indictment. That is the only way justice will be found in this case. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Yannetti, are you all set?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
So the same time, and let's see.
I mean, why didn't he just say, when we can go back from scratch and find the people that really did this and stop going down the wrong avenue? Because it's, he doesn't take that next step. I was surprised. I really thought he would go to take that next step and say, so we can go down the right avenue and find the right people responsible. John O'Keefe's family deserves that. But obviously he's pressed for time too. So to be fair.
How you do with it?
We believe our witnesses. They are telling the truth. Karen Reed is guilty. Any suggestion to the contrary is a desperate attempt to reassign guilt. Can you imagine a district attorney with a sworn duty to do justice and respect the presumption of innocence issuing such a statement in a pending case? Before August 25th of 2023, I could not. Yet that was the message of Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey to potential jurors in this case on that date. I've been practicing criminal law as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney for over 30 years now. Never have I seen such unethical conduct from a prosecutor. I know of at least one law professor who used Mr. Morrissey's statement in his class to teach his law students how a prosecutor should not act. Another member of the bar has already reported Mr. Morrissey's conduct to the BBO. And now we are here with a...
So he's saying it's okay for Karen Reed to go on Nightline. It's okay for them to do an entire free Karen Reed PR campaign, but it's not okay for the state to put out their side. Yeah, I really think that there should be a law on both sides, that they should not be talking to the press before a trial. So impartially, I'm in agreement with him. I think this has got to stop, this kind of trying these cases in the press, both pre and post conviction. Because like I said, you can say anything in a documentary. We like to think these documentaries are telling us the truth. But we know that, I found out the hard way that the public just does not have the time to read the transcripts, does not have the time to go to the trial. So these convicted killers can spin it any way they want in these documentaries. And the people behind this movement have an ideology where they want as many of these people free as possible. They don't believe in more than 20 years for anyone on anything. So he's got a point here. This is the best point in the whole hearing.
Motion to disqualify Mr. Morrissey from further prosecuting this case because he has a personal interest in the outcome. Your Honor, this court should grant our motion to disqualify. And at the outset, I note that we've also moved for sanctions, dismissal of these indictments as a result of his misconduct. But we have so many additional grounds for dismissal as a result of the material provided to both sides by the federal authorities that we will be filing a further motion to dismiss for extraordinary governmental misconduct. My co-counsel has spoken to that previously. To the extent that the court entertains our motion for sanctions, specifically dismissal as a result of his egregious...
Can I just interrupt there and ask you, are these going to be the same motion, essentially?
No. There's information and evidence that's been provided by the federal authorities which deals with the egregious conduct of both the district attorney and his investigators and the police. That will be the subject of a separate motion, Your Honor.
So I thought that was going to be your supplemental memo to this motion. It sounds like it's the same issue.
So that DA is already out of the case. My understanding is that he's no longer involved in the case. They're just saying that this comment was so prejudicial and wrong. And I heard there were so many problems with this DA. I'd love to. Partially of what I talk about on my channel is this new breed of DAs that have been put in by an ideological movement to totally pervert that. So the way our justice system works is that two sides, a little bit like how it works in my own apartment, two sides of an issue, right? Fight it out. That's what makes our justice system so good and strong. But instead, George Gascon and George Soros had this great idea that they'd fund all these former defense attorneys to run as district attorney. And so in blue cities across America, you have two defense attorneys now talking to themselves in court, and their sole interest is on the defendant. And there's no one there representing the people, and there's no one there representing the victim. So I'd be very interested to learn. And yeah, thanks, honey. Yeah, we have a horrible DA Bragg. And I'm so sorry. I really have to apologize that it's just taking me a lot longer than I thought to prepare for this live stream. I didn't realize, I thought I had scheduled it for today and I scheduled it for tomorrow, but eventually I will get it together and come out with the episode. It's just taking me a little bit longer in research than to present the kind of episode I'd like. So my apologies to everyone for that, for my consistent moving of it. But, you know, this is a real concern that I have about district attorneys. Like Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore just got convicted on two different counts of fraud. So this is a real issue that we're having in our justice system right now. So it'd be really interesting to see what's made of that and to see the history, who funded Morrissey, and it's very interesting that the feds came in, that it was such a serious violation that they came in and reached in this case. So pretty interesting.
No, it's not. And what I'm saying to the court is I have limited time.
When I interrupt you, I stop the time.
Well, I appreciate that. But even with that, Your Honor, the focus of my argument is going to be on the disqualification as opposed to the dismissal. I've submitted papers on the dismissal.
So is this someone hired by the defense who used to work for the feds? Or is this someone who is currently working for the federal government, and he is letting the judge know how the feds are going to move? That's what it sounds like to my ear, how the feds are going to move on this case. But if this is some kind of defense expert, like that's often like you see in true crime. I used to be bamboozled by them all the time, these ex-FBI people. Is this like an ex-FBI person? Or this sounds like a current FBI person. Let me know in the chat. Like I said, I'm just catching up with all this now. I watched this yesterday, but obviously not as closely as I am right now.
I will rest on those papers with regard to that issue. That's my only point.
All right. So when you file the other motion, I need you to include in your memo how that's different specifically from this.
Understood.
Not just the remedy, but how the basis of
Understood.
it is different.
Understood.
All right, so I'm going to start you again from scratch. Go right ahead.
I appreciate it. Well, Your Honor, this case admittedly has been an unusual one for a district attorney to deal with. The district attorney's office is not accustomed to a criminal defendant fighting back in the way we have prior to trial. What usually happens when the prosecution brings charges is they detail the allegations at an arraignment in court, and as a result, their narrative and theory of the case becomes widely reported, while the defendant and the defense team remain relatively quiet. After arraignment, moreover, the media...
That is untrue. That is totally, what he just said there is totally untrue. Totally untrue. At least in the high profile cases, the defense works hand in hand with our media getting their story out. I mean, does anyone, I hate to go back to Alec Baldwin, but does anyone remember Rust movie facts or whatever that appeared on Twitter and on Reddit after that, and the interview with Stephanopoulos he did? The defense really were, and I'd like to see this, like I just said, X'd out on both sides, but so often the prosecutors will stay silent while the defense just goes through the media. And if you'll see the videos available in this case, it's always Karen Reed, Karen Reed's lawyer, Karen Reed's parents, someone representing the Free Karen Reed movement. So this one statement, they're talking about one statement versus multiple different appearances all over our media, and a huge movement, a huge social media movement. And that's pretty regular for the defense. So once I hear someone say something that I know to be at least incongruent, I won't say untrue, but incongruent with my experience, my eyebrow gets raised.
Media typically lose interest and wait until a trial or potential resolution of the case before they start reporting on the case again. And in this way, the district attorney's office is quite accustomed to always controlling the narrative in pending cases, at least until the defense makes an opening statement at trial. And as long as the prosecution...
This is untrue. This is the biggest Darvo deny, attack, reverse victim offender, or to reverse the way things are that I've ever seen. This is wild. This is wild. I would think even my boyfriend would agree that this is just not so. How many of these big media campaigns have we seen? Does anyone remember Jodi Arias's interviews? Scott Peterson's? I'm just thinking of cases off the top of my head. And in local trials, the same thing. In lesser, not national trials, I see the same thing. If it's different in your state, let me know. But this is not reality. Thanks, Dean Walker, for the super sticker. Nice to have you here. Yeah. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening. I'm finding this really interesting.
The prosecution gets to control the narrative in the press. They have no problem with what's being reported. But of course, this case has been different. Their control of the narrative did not last very long here. In our view, it became clear very early on in this case that their narrative was wrong. Their theory of the case was wrong. Their allegations did not fit with the evidence that we fought so hard and for so long to get access to over 2 long years.
So people in the chat are telling me this is Reed's original defense attorney. Is that right? So the way that this is being presented, at least in social media, is that this is the feds representing the FBI or something. How is he in any position to, oh God, I'd love to have a lawyer. Oh man. I'd love to have a lawyer explain this to me, how he can sue as a third party or whatever on this. Or is he still part of the defense team? So he's saying we're going to countersue for basically like her rights being violated.
So along the way, we spoke out about our findings of exculpatory evidence, mostly within this courtroom, but occasionally outside. The DA was not used to that and apparently didn't like it because they initially sought the extraordinary remedy from this court of trying to gag the defense from exercising our First Amendment rights to discuss a client who at all times is
With me, fellas! This ain't my first time at the rodeo. Don't
You want to hear it?
fellas! This ain't my first time at the rodeo.
Thank you, Busty. Thank you for that. Yeah, I guess that's what she's thinking right now. Crazy. This is some theater. I mean, I feel like we're watching that scene in Chicago, you know, like give him the old razzle dazzle. Like this is some razzle dazzle we're seeing here. This is just everything he's saying is like an opposite world to what I've seen in true crime in my whole life, you know, watching true crime from the Menendez case on. And yes, I'm that old that I watched the Menendez case.
presumed to
in real time.
be innocent. And as you know, they filed that motion on June 9th of 2023, and it didn't work. The court denied the motion, specifically ruling that any statements attributed to counsel could generally be characterized as responses to the accusations against Ms. Reed and are therefore permitted under the rules. When you made that ruling, though, Your Honor, you admonished both sides that commenting on the credibility of witnesses would have a prejudicial effect on the proceeding. And at that point, we largely stopped making extrajudicial statements. By contrast, Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey, only 25 days after that court's ruling, instead decided to blatantly ignore this court's admonishment. DA Morrissey went off the rails.
You know, it's really interesting about Chicago when Bob Fosse's first premiere of the Music Chicago came out. It was an absolute flop. That was at the height of this very pro-defense, I would guess, you know, we were redoing our justice system to kind of favor criminals, and it was only after the OJ trial did it become really relevant. And I think it's the deepest piece of media, I mean, creative media ever, you know, created about innocence fraud. And that's obviously my interest. True crime. And it's how our media, you know, the media, if you watch, I don't know, if you watch Court TV and if you watch Law and Crime, they have an incentive to always raise the defense points to create doubt. And sometimes these cases are just like slam dunk cases. And you'll have Vinnie Politan going on and on about some, you know, minute point. Like I think he was, speaking of the Russ case, he was going on and on about how the gun could fire, the FBI proved that the gun could fire on by itself, you know, when it really clearly couldn't. But to his credit, he's also had some good witnesses. It's just, I get frustrated with it sometimes by the caliber of people they have on that show.
Gave an
On both shows, Law and Crime and Court TV.
unprecedented video statement to the media where he specifically vouched for the credibility.
I mean, just to finally make my point, excuse me, I know that must have been annoying, but to make my point, can we all remember, now I'm forgetting her name, the Palms Up lady? Oh, Janine Driver, I remembered it. And her palms up, how Wendy Adelson was telling the truth because her palms were up. Those body language people can be the worst because it doesn't really have any clear rules and she has zero background in it. She gave one lecture to the FBI, and now she worked for the FBI when she worked for the Tobacco Firearms Department, the federal government, doing something totally unrelated to body language.
Of Commonwealth witnesses, in violation of the rules of professional responsibility, in violation of this court's order. A member of the public issued a public records request, and we got this to show all of the media outlets that DA Morrissey made sure received his statement. Before any trial has occurred, he called the defense theory in this case, quote, a false narrative. Before any trial has occurred, he announced his opinion that nobody within the home at 34 Fairview participated in any murder or any cover-up. Before any trial, he vouched for the credibility of Commonwealth witnesses Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, and Brian Albert. He announced that those witnesses were forthcoming. In other words, truthful. Before any trial has occurred, DA Morrissey announced that the defense theory is, quote, a desperate attempt to reassign guilt, end quote. Given those broad statements of Mr. Morrissey's opinion that Karen Read is guilty, can you believe that the DA in their opposition to this motion had the audacity to claim that DA Morrissey's words were narrowly tailored to the harassment of witnesses? It goes without saying, but your words are not narrowly tailored if you're a prosecutor vouching for the credibility of witnesses, particularly after a judge told you not to do that. Your words are not narrowly tailored if you're announcing to the public that you've already assigned guilt to a criminal defendant before trial. A desperate attempt to reassign guilt. DA Morrissey announced to every potential juror in Norfolk County not that someone charged with a crime is innocent until proven guilty. The words innocent until proven guilty never came out of his mouth. Instead, he announced his office had already assigned guilt to Karen Read. So in his view, when she fought back by reasserting her right to be presumed innocent, he deemed that a desperate attempt to reassign guilt. Never, in over 30 years of practice, have I ever witnessed an elected DA so blatantly violate the rules of professional responsibility. Never have I witnessed an elected DA trample on the constitutional rights of a criminal defendant who enjoys.
Yeah, well, this guy is already retired. But I mean, this is just like more time for this is really, it seems to me like a PR exercise more for the defense than anything else here. Once you find out that this is a defense attorney, yeah.
The presumption of innocence, and I do have some perspective in this area. I had the privilege of spending the first 10 years of my career as an assistant district attorney in Middlesex County. I had the privilege of working with and for some of the finest DAs this Commonwealth has ever seen, from Scott Harshbarger to my mentor, Tom Riley, to Martha Coakley, Jerry Leone, Marion Ryan. In addition, I worked with some of the finest Massachusetts state troopers acting as homicide investigators.
I mean, aren't we all in agreement, including the Morrissey who resigned? Is that his name? I hope I got his name correct. That he wasn't the best. Didn't he resign in disgrace? So he's no longer at the wheel. So what are we talking about here? This will be interesting to hear what the judge has to say.
Men and women I respect for their integrity and prowess as ethical investigators. In a million years, I could not imagine any of my former colleagues and bosses making such a statement. They were professionals with ethics and a humble respect for the awesome power they possessed as public prosecutors. So for those reasons, in some ways, it pains me to have to file a motion like this. But DA Morrissey, through his poor and unethical decision-making, to release a video statement designed to prejudice potential jurors against my client, has forced my hand. So the question then becomes, why did he do this? Why did he take such a personal interest in this case, such that he would take the unprecedented, and that's his word, unprecedented step of vouching for Commonwealth witnesses? Why would he take the...
Do I have that wrong? I thought that's what Court TV said, that he resigned, or was that a different? They're talking about this is the current DA they're talking about here? Do I have it wrong? Let me know. Let me know. I do not want to put out false information. Let me know if I'm wrong in the chat.
Unprecedented step of denigrating the defense theory to potential jurors. The unprecedented step of announcing to the public that Karen Read is guilty. Why would he trample over the presumption of innocence and announce that we're trying to reassign the guilt that he's already assigned to her? Well, on December 4th of 2023, we began to learn why. That was when the DA released to us correspondence he had had with the U.S. Attorney's Office, which dated back to May of 2023. That correspondence revealed that federal authorities were investigating this case. And it's worth noting they only released those to us once Fox 25 had succeeded in a public records request, and they knew what they had kept hidden was going to be revealed. And once we got those letters, we learned why they wanted them hidden. We learned that in May of 2023, the DA's office knew there was a federal investigation. They did not reveal that knowledge to the defense. In fact, on June 12th of 2023, the acting U.S. attorney specifically told the DA's office they could reveal the existence of this federal investigation to us, but they didn't. They kept it secret. And then worse, Your Honor, on December 4th of 2023, the district attorney's office provided a false notice of discovery to this court and to the defense. In that notice of discovery, they claimed they had received no confirmation that any witnesses had testified before a federal grand jury. We now know that was a lie. We know it's a lie because 7 months earlier, DA Morrissey wrote that multiple state witnesses had received subpoenas. We know that was a lie because now that we've got the information from the feds, Nicole Albert testified before a federal grand jury that she participated in a group conference call with Jennifer McCabe, Matt McCabe, Brian Albert, ADA Lally, and victim witness advocate Stephen Nelson, a group conference call before she testified before the federal grand jury in July of 2023. We also know.
All right, I am wrong. I apologize. I got some wrong information. Morrissey is the DA. It's the DA before him resigned. My apologies, everyone. I'm still learning. So he was sworn in early on January 2nd to succeed William R. Keating, who resigned to take a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. Okay, my apologies.
No, it was a lie because he wrote in his letter, and I quote, "We have confirmed that witnesses testified before the federal grand jury." Yet 7 months later, the DA's office tells this court that it had received no confirmation. That is outrageous.
Oh, he's getting close to the mic. He's doing a close to the mic thing. He's really leaning in there for extra dramatic effect. Dr. Zap. Dr. Zap. Thanks so much. Happy Pi Day tomorrow. Oh, that's cool. See you later. Aw. All right. Yeah, this is probably going on too long. I'm sorry, guys. I just want to see what the judge says. Thank you, Dr. Zap. Thanks for sticking with me. I know this is extremely long. I really just want to see what the judge says. And that's the thing, really, there are no shortcuts in watching this stuff. It's all important.
We are outraged that he lied to us. This court should be outraged that DA Morrissey lied to you. In a prior hearing in this case, I argued to this court that the letters back and forth confirmed that DA Morrissey believed that he personally and his office in general was being targeted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. I chose my words carefully. I never said he received a target letter. The existence of a target letter is irrelevant. The inquiry is, what does the DA know and believe? And he revealed in those letters what he knew and believed. He revealed that he believed that U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins had a personal animus against him. He wrote, quote, "She's made no secret of her personal animosity towards me." He also wrote that the head of the public corruption unit at the U.S. Attorney's Office may be personally retaliating against him and targeting him because his wife was unhappy with the way the Norfolk DA treated her. He wrote, in short, that he knew, felt, and believed that he and his office were being targeted. Now, why is that important? It's important because of the immense power that a prosecutor has. It is important because we need an unbiased prosecutor with no vested interest in a case to try to administer justice based on the evidence and not based on any personal interest in a case. It is important because, in the words of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Robert H.
Well, so now he's arguing that he has a personal interest in the case, not a belief that he's guilty. I mean, that Karen Reed's guilty, excuse me. That's something different. Am I misunderstanding his argument? What I'm hearing is he's saying that he has a personal vested interest in the case. My understanding is he came out and made a taped statement that all the reasons Karen Reed was guilty. Probably in reaction, this was August 2023, to this giant PR campaign. So that's a little different than saying that he's biased. No, he's representing the case that they're bringing forward. It's like saying that the defense attorney has no interest in justice because they're defending Karen Reed. There's two sides, fight it out. That's how our justice system works.
Jackson, quote, "We must have assurance that those..."
But it's a little bit difficult position for the defense to say you don't fight it out in public before a trial when they're fighting it out in public before a trial.
To wield this power will be guided solely by public responsibility.
So I just want to tell you, you've gone over your time. I see you're reading, so you have some idea on how much longer you have. How much longer do you have with that?
Probably about 3 minutes, Judge.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Indeed, Your Honor, Justice Jackson practically spoke to D.A. Morrissey from the grave. The prosecutor...
So this is... He does have a personal interest. Mick Murphy says in this case, Morrissey stuck to his failed investigation. No, if it's a failed investigation, the jury will acquit. That hasn't been proven yet. That's just what the defense is saying. And separately being investigated by the U.S. Attorney's Office and FBI for corruption. But how does it affect his belief in Karen Reed's guilt? If it's a bad investigation, that all comes clean in court, Mick.
The prosecutor has more control over life, liberty, and reputation than any other person in America. His discretion is tremendous. He can have citizens investigated, and if he is that kind of person, he can have this done to the tune of public statements and veiled or unveiled intimations, or the prosecutor may choose.
So they're saying he has all this power to do all this nefarious stuff without actually proving that he's done any of it. So if he's done it in another area, and if he's done it in this case, then they should have some proof. And that they should be confident, not just sort of allude to it.
Use a more subtle course and simply have citizens' friends interviewed. Prosecutor can order arrests, present cases to a grand jury in a secret session, and on the basis of his one-sided presentation of facts can cause the citizen to be indicted and held for trial. Well, while the prosecutor at his best is one of the most beneficial forces in our society, when he acts with malice or other base motives, he's one of the worst. In his own words,
where did he show that he has a motivation, a personal motivation of malice against Karen Reed? That has not been shown. That has not been proved, nor does he provide any evidence of personal malice against Karen Reed.
D.A. Morrissey revealed he has an interest in this case that goes beyond the interests of justice. He revealed that he knew that his office was being unfairly targeted and investigated. And it doesn't matter if his belief or knowledge was right or wrong. It's only important.
So if he feels that his office is being unfairly targeted and investigated, okay, separate from this case, how does prosecuting Karen Reed change that?
That he believes it. And this means he has a personal interest in getting Karen Reed convicted. If he can use whatever means he has at his disposal to convict her, and he succeeds, that would vindicate him and harm the federal investigation of his office.
Oh, that would harm. How would that harm the federal investigation of his office? So what they're saying is to pick up what has now become a pretty unpopular case, thanks to this PR campaign that the defense has put on, that he somehow benefits from prosecuting Karen Read. If anything, it gives him the total lack of support of the people, which he needs desperately during this time. These are DAs are elected officials. They need the popular vote. So this doesn't help him. And I think this is a terror. This guy he's like bizarro opposite argument to my ears.
On the other hand, if she's found not guilty, as we expect she will be, he knows that he and his office will remain in the crosshairs of the federal investigation. And it's important to note, Your Honor, both sides have been made aware multiple times that as we have this hearing today, that federal investigation is still open. They've called most of the Commonwealth's witnesses to testify, but they're not done. DA Morrissey has an interest in this case not to do justice, but to win. That's why he hid his knowledge.
Just saying, yes, it does, Mick. That's not an argument. You got to support your argument.
Of the federal investigation for 7 months. That's why he slow-walked discovery. That's why he gave a lengthy video statement saying Karen Read is guilty. That's why he talked about our theory being a desperate attempt to reassign guilt. And perhaps that's why, in contravention of Judge Krupp's preservation order, DA Morrissey's office gave the go-ahead to Brian Albert and Brian Higgins to destroy or dispose of their phones. We only learned that because the federal authorities revealed that in their investigation. And I'm just about ready to end. The DA also, as my colleague has...
Who destroyed their phones, and how is that pertinent to this investigation of Karen Read?
I'm sorry, the FBI has confirmed that Jennifer McCabe Googled, how long to die in the cold at 2:27 in the morning. But what has not yet been mentioned is that 5 minutes before that, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert were calling each other at 2:22 in the morning on January 29th after previously testifying they were both asleep at that time. There was a lot of suspicious activity in the early morning hours of January involving the witnesses that Morrissey improperly announced to the public were telling the truth. We're getting to the bottom of it, and the truth will come out.
Good. Then why are you at a motion to dismiss hearing? Shouldn't you be desperate for the truth to come out? This is so weird. Oh, blessed. My apologies, guys. I did it again. I'm so... Are we really this far along in this thing? Let me see. Are we really this far behind? Okay, let me go back. I think we're around here, around 49. Let's see where we are and see if I can find it again. My apologies.
Of his office. On the other hand, if she's found of the federal investigation. And it's important to note, Your Honor, both sides have been made aware multiple times that as we have this hearing today, that federal investigation is still open. They've called most of the Commonwealth's witnesses to testify, but they're not done. DA Morrissey has an interest in this case not to do justice, but to win. That's why he hid his knowledge of the federal investigation for 7 months. That's why he slow-walked discovery. That's why he gave a lengthy video statement.
So there's a federal investigation into how this case was done. And so it's going to support his case if she's convicted. But they're asking that none of that evidence come to light. If the opposite would be true, he would be putting motion to dismiss if he didn't want any of this evidence to come to light. He wouldn't want anyone to testify and any of the sunlight to be shown on this case.
Saying Karen Read is guilty. That's why he talked about our theory being a desperate attempt to reassign guilt. And perhaps that's why, in contravention of Judge Krupp's preservation order, DA Morrissey's office gave the go-ahead to Brian Albert and Brian Higgins to destroy or dispose of their phones. We only learned that because the federal authorities revealed that in their investigation. And I'm just
Okay, so there we are on the phone destroying things. So he's saying that, is that after they got all the relevant information out of the phones or before? That's a kind of crucial detail that's left out there.
about ready to end. The DA also, as my colleague has indicated, I'm sorry, the FBI has confirmed that Jennifer McCabe Googled, how long to die in the cold at 2:27 in the morning. But what has not yet been mentioned is that 5 minutes before that, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert were calling each other at 2:22 in the morning on January 29th after previously testifying they were both asleep at that time. There was a lot of suspicious activity in the early morning hours of January involving the witnesses that Morrissey improperly announced to the public were telling the truth. We're getting to the bottom of it, and the truth will come out.
The truth will come out, but not in this trial, because this is a motion, this is a hearing to dismiss the entire trial before any of the truth comes out.
But as we continue to defend her, Your Honor, like any criminal defendant, my client deserves a neutral, impartial prosecutor interested solely in justice with no vested outcome in this case. And it's crystal clear we do not have that in Michael Morrissey. That is why he should be disqualified from this case. And that is why I urge you to do just that in the interests of impartial justice.
All right. Thank you very much. Who's arguing this? You, Mr. Lally? Yes. All right, so let's start with 10 if you need more.
Thank you, Your Honor. And again, I don't think I'm going to need much more than that. Again, I know the court has reviewed all the materials, and I know the court is well aware of the standard, and it's a standard which I would submit just simply hasn't been met here. To characterize counsel's actions in this particular proceeding with specific reference to the media and saying it's different, I think is minimization to the highest degree. Essentially, what the defendant is positing, or what counsel is positing in this motion, is that due to a recorded statement by the district attorney over 6 months ago, that impinges on her right to a fair trial, or it impinges, shows some sort of deleterious motive on behalf of the district attorney in the handling of this case. The statement, as the district attorney indicated in it, was in response to an extraordinary degree of relentless and really relentless harassment and intimidation of nearly every witness associated with this case, which included a July 22nd rolling rally of nearly 100 people traveling to witnesses' homes and calling them murderers. That is largely what this was in.
That I find very concerning. Why isn't Karen Reed getting her supporters under control, saying, we don't do that? The truth will come out. I have a great legal team. I have faith in the American justice system. You don't go out and intimidate witnesses. If you believe in you're talking about all these processes being fair, how can it be fair when a group of basically a pitchforky mob going out and intimidating witnesses? That speaks more to that not wanting things to be fair. That points to a might makes right kind of attitude. There's more of us than you. We're louder. We're well funded, because the money is not in this side of the. This is a very expensive legal team she's got going here. I'm sure a lot of people have opened up their hearts and their wallets and their time, donated to Karen Reed, and she thanks them by okaying this kind of behavior.
Response to it is in complete conformity with Massachusetts Rules of Professional Conduct 3.6b6 that permits an attorney to make a warning of danger concerning the behavior of a person involved when there is reason to believe that there exists a likelihood of substantial harm to an individual or to the public interest. It's also in conformity.
Sure, they're talking about 100 people going door to door. That's not a journalist asking questions. That's 100 people going to door accusing people of being murderers.
with Rule of Professional Conduct 3.6c, which allows for such statements to rebut the prejudicial effects of the defendant's and her counsel's misconduct. Now, again, I know the court has read through the Commonwealth's opposition, but just to highlight a few of those particular incidents. So yes, the July 31st, I believe, was the ruling in regard to the, for lack of a better term, a gag order. And I think it's been somewhat inappropriately or just patently falsely represented to this court in public what that ruling said. It indicated that the statements of counsel arguably crossed the line of permissibility under Rule 3.6, and that meaning defense counsel. That the inflammatory statements about the Commonwealth and witnesses, particularly by Attorney Jackson, appear to have fueled much of the publicity in this case, and that's a quote from the court's ruling. And that the defense counsel did not have carte blanche to speak with the media, and going forward, defense counsel should ensure that their statements are limited in conformity with the rules. And it denied the Commonwealth's request for that gag order at this time, denying it without prejudice. And then Mr. Giannetti wants to get up here and say that they largely stopped making extrajudicial statements after the court's ruling. And so I guess largely stopping would then include August 22nd, the day before the district attorney's statement, a ABC News broadcast in which Mr. Giannetti and Mr. Jackson were featured for a 9-minute, 37-second segment, in which Attorney Jackson indicated that pieces of taillight were planted after the fact, that the victim walked into the house, I think he was confronted, was likely brought down to the basement. I think the confrontation got physical and he was beaten to a point of unconsciousness, that he had defensive wounds, bruises on the back of his hands, largely of which is all not only not true, but directly contradictory to the vast amount of evidence that has been turned over in this case. Mr. Jackson then went on to continue that this was a cover-up, and indicating that John was murdered inside that house, his body was placed outside. This also continued into September. September 17th, the defendant, traveling with Attorney Jackson, Attorney Little, and a woman believed to be a television news producer, to the victim's home, to Mr. O'Keefe's home, in direct violation of her conditions of release, where she has to stay away from, as well as other places of interest and sort of tour around the town of Canton. When balancing the amount of public and prejudicial statements made by the defendant and her counsel, the Commonwealth would suggest that then characterizing the district attorney's statement from over 6 months ago, threatening her right to a fair trial, is simply a position that's just untenable.
Right. I mean, just look at YouTube. Just look at how many statements they've made, how many interviews they've given, how many her parents have given interviews. I mean, which side do you hear about more? Do you hear about more the Karen Read is guilty side or the Karen Read is innocent side? And I think that we're going to see the state is going to prove their case in court, or try to prove their theory. And, it's just a theory. The jury can disbelieve the state's theory and still find Karen Read guilty.
Now, in context, as far as those particular statements, those particular actions go, as the court is well aware, there is a significant history between this defendant, Mr. Yannetti, Mr. Jackson, and the social media blogger, Mr. Kearney, who's now been indicted for intimidation of witnesses in this case. And with reference to that, there is a significant, despite public indications to the contrary.
Right. So this is a kind of reversal that you often see. So they're accusing the state of a lot of the things that they're doing, intimidating witnesses. I mean, that is the textbook example of an unfair trial, when you're out intimidating witnesses. And all this seems to be done with Karen Read's approval. Why, if she loved John O'Keefe? Wouldn't she want to preserve the process?
that indications from Mr. Kearney's phone, which was seized, is that there is a precipitous amount of phone communications, indications of communications between Mr. Kearney and Ms. Reed on a signal messaging app, an encrypted app, as well as, I believe, about 189 phone calls over a span of a few months. And that's just what's indicated or contained in the phone. There is also, going back to the spring of 23, direct communications between Mr. Kearney and Mr. Yannetti and Mr. Kearney and Mr. Jackson. They went out to lunch with Mr. Kearney following a court date in May of 2023. And this is a person who counsel in the memo seems to want to distance themselves from, based, I'm presuming, on subsequent indictments. But the truth is in the phone. The phone doesn't lie as far as those communications are concerned, as far as those communications between counsel and between the defendant in this particular case. So to say that this is a different case, again, I would suggest is a large minimization of what actually has transpired here. Lastly, what I'll say in reference to the federal grand jury, what is also clear from the federal grand jury is that this was an investigation which was initiated by the defendant and Mr. Yannetti. So to claim that he was in the dark or didn't know about this federal investigation, every bit of discovery that the federal government has from the state case was provided by Mr. Yannetti. Nothing was asked for from the Commonwealth, nothing was asked for from the district attorney's office, the state police. So again, what I was intimating before in reference to the motion to dismiss, I have no idea what they have seen or what they haven't seen, how much of the file, how much of the discovery or anything else. It's all sort of been provided and colored by Mr. Yannetti. And this goes back to November of 2022. So to then claim that you were sandbagged or didn't know about an investigation that you initiated over a year before until late in December of 2023 is, I think,
Yeah, that's a little inconvenient facts that they initiate. Oh, I can't speak anymore. Sorry, guys. I'm at almost hour 3 here. Initiated an investigation, and then there's a year ago, and then saying that they had no knowledge of it. Not great. Well,
disingenuous disingenuous would be about the nicest term that I can come up with for that. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Yannetti, a short rebuttal, I guess, or a short comment.
I would just add, Your Honor, that the focus of Mr. Lally's argument was on everything except for Mr. Morrissey's conduct. Just like it doesn't matter if Mr. Morrissey and his office are actually targets of an investigation, it's only what he knew and believed. Similarly, with regard to his conduct in keeping secret the existence of a federal investigation, it doesn't matter whether we knew about it or not. It's the fact that Morrissey knew, kept it secret for 7 months, and didn't reveal it to the defense until the media got access to those letters. And with that, I would rest.
Okay. Thank you. So I do have a question. Did you file the Rule 17 motions already, or do you expect to file them later today?
We will be filing them by the close of business today.
Okay, and they're pretty much outlined in your previous motion, what you needed to file, or are there additional ones in your motion?
They're outlined. Yeah, they're outlined, Judge.
Okay, I asked because Mr. Roach told me that on the March 20th date.
so the judge is like, I just want to make sure that everything's done by the letter. Did you fill out that form? Sherry Davis, longest live ever, isn't it? Thanks. I don't know. I find it all very interesting, and it'll be even more interesting to see how the trial goes and see. And as I learn more and as I read more, if my opinion gets changed. I'm just telling you how I feel now watching this. And of course, as I've said before, my interest is in innocence fraud and innocence campaigns, and wrongful conviction movement. what I consider the biggest fraud in America that nobody's talking about right now. So when I see tactics like 100 people going door to door and the defendant not saying this is wrong, I find that very concerning, in addition to her answers given in that interview. And that speech by her first defense attorney was, I found thank you very much, Shari, just entirely untrue. And if anything, I think the rebuttal was a little mild by the prosecutor.
The counsel wants it to be via Zoom. I'd prefer it not be, because with Rule 17, as you know, the record holders come into court and object. So I don't want you all to be on the screen. And Mr. Yannetti, certainly your local counsel. Mr. Jackson, if you want to be on the screen, you can. But I need somebody here.
I understood you, Ron. That's fine.
Okay?
That's fine.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah. If I may just...
Yes.
Can I appear in person and have my client join me?
No, she has to be here.
Okay. Thank you, Judge.
All right. Was there something else? Yes.
I would ask, may we approach just as the scheduling issues?
Okay.
So this has been a fascinating, very theatrical hearing. You know, I went to so many of these hearings in the Nexium hearing when Allison Mack from Smallville was a defendant, and Claire Bronfman of the Seagram's heir was a defendant. She fainted, I believe. She fainted, or she performed a faint, depending on your viewpoint. She miraculously seemed to recover by the time she looked very pleased with herself by the time the paramedics came, when she was asked right after she was asked a very tough question by the judge. A lot of these hearings are really very interesting, and some of the times they're boring or quick, or it's like a scheduling thing, but hearings like this can be really fascinating. And I'm glad I got an opportunity to watch it, because certainly this is going to be a really lively trial. Does anyone know why there's all those marshals in the hearing? Is there some kind of threat? That's happened before. All right, Jay Ross, here's my issue. If he shouldn't discuss a case, then why don't you have an issue with the defense putting on a full PR campaign? The PD may be corrupt, but can the defense prove corruption in this case? You have to prove it. You can't just assert it. You have to prove it. And you would think that they would want to prove it in court. I'm totally with you, Jay Ross. I think neither the prosecution nor the defense should talk. I think there should be an absolute media blackout. Totally. But you can't say that Karen Reed going on Nightline and doing multiple media appearances and her parents doing a media appearance is okay, and not DA Morrissey. I agree with you. These things should not be argued out of court. It's got to stop. But we have this First Amendment in our country. So it creates an incredible imbalance because our press is so defendant friendly and everyone seems to be indoctrinated into all our higher learnings that everyone who's accused of anything is innocent and that our justice system is so unfair and everyone is so corrupt. I'm not in love with politicians, certainly, but I've been to court multiple times. And the way it's portrayed and actually what I've seen happen is not congruent with a rap. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but show me that it's happened here. Just because it's happened in the past or even happened with these people does not mean it's happened here. So that's going to be really interesting to see what comes out in court. And I think everybody who is on the free Karen Read side, eyebrows should be raised a little bit. That they don't want a trial, that they're asking for a dismissal. Thanks, Brooklyn Janet. Can someone tell me what this beeping is and why all these marshals are here? It's so interesting. Thank you, Brooklyn Janet. Oh, your dog is so cute. I just want to keep it up for a second just to look at that little fuzzball. So cute. Oh, man. Susan Hassey, we have definitely had our share of police corruption in New York. But just because something's happened in the past doesn't mean it's happened here. Prove that it's happened in this case. That is what the defense, and if they prove it, if Aaron Reed's side proves that there was this kind of corruption in this case, I'm going in with it to open mind. I'll be the first person to stand up. I have changed my mind on so many, on the entire ideology that I was indoctrinated into. So I am not one to be dig in my heels into an opinion. So I just want to, you have to be really careful that because something happens or looks like, or they can make it look like something's happened, that it really did happen, because defense attorneys can be very good at that. Yeah, Maui Swift. I think your prediction, I believe, is correct. They do get denied. This is going to go forward. Can anyone explain to me the beeping? The court is monitoring Karen Reed's hard fake. Thank you. No, she appears calm and confident. She sure does appear confident, which also makes my antenna go up. I would be so upset if I were being accused of this, of someone I loved. But even when people in your life, when when they die, when you're having during a difficult time in your relationship, it's still devastating. But I never saw any of that grieving with her. What I see is that kind of Jodi Arias, I won kind of smug quality in her. Doesn't mean she's guilty. I'm just telling you what I'm looking at. Certainly, we haven't seen a trial. We haven't seen the evidence. And this is going to be really interesting, I think, with what comes out with the state's theory of death and the evidence that they have, and the state says they have a lot of reasonable doubt. But it's not a good look to say, you know, forget it. Let's not even go to trial. I'm so bewildered by what's going on. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, bless you. Oh, I'm so grateful to know the answer to this. Our row former, when they have a sidebar, they put on a noise machine. So it's that's what we have in New York too. We have the same noise machine on top of the talks that are being heard. The beeping, I think, signifies that it's on. Oh, that we don't have in New York City courts. Great. Thank you. Mystery solved. Oh, I feel so relieved to know the answer to that. We're almost at the end here. I guess I should move forward. And I don't know why I'm sitting here talking through this. Didn't they vote to dismiss these and didn't say they were going forward? Or I guess we're not going to hear from the judge? Is it not on this thing? All right, I just don't want to miss it. Yeah, we're right at the end. I have another video where they discuss what happened. Oh, here we go.
All right, you had a question, Mr. Jackson?
I did, Your Honor, just about the logistics of the trial, meaning days in trial, half days, 5 days a week, 4 days a week. I wanted to get some sort of sense so we can begin planning.
Okay, so we're going to go full days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, half days, Tuesday, Thursday.
Are the half days afternoon or half days morning?
Mornings.
Half days mornings? So does that, oh, well, she'll explain what it means.
Okay, anything else right now?
Can I have 1 moment? No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, anything from the Commonwealth?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. McDermott?
Judge, I just wanted to put on the record that I think I provided to everyone copies of that letter from Google.
So is it, we're going forward with a trial and we're going to wait on her opinion? All right, I'm going to go do some research. I feel terribly ill-prepared. I really thought she was going to come out with her opinion. Maybe she's going to sit on it and think on it and write on it later. But I thought, hold on, let me pull up the video I have I'm really going on hour number crazy here. Like the James Brown of true crime podcasters now. Like, hold on a second. Please hold, guys, as I pull up this video from Court TV where they'll tell us what happened here. Well, I keep hold on one second. I think I have it. I hope I have it. If I don't, I'll come back tomorrow. I'm on tomorrow and we'll talk more about this. So fascinating case. If you're listening, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode, leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Here we go. So let's move forward. Okay, here we go.
John O'Keefe's actual cause of death. How did he die? You know, was he run over by a car, or was he beaten inside the home that Karen Reed says she dropped him off at? So, beginning with the Google search. The Google search is how long.
So wait, so is this just the hearing and the judge is going to think on it? Wait, hold on. I got to go back to the beginning. My apologies.
Right. That's the setup of the story. So today in court, Some important stuff was happening. 2 defense motions were argued in court. A motion to dismiss the indictment. This is huge because they're laying out a lot of the evidence.
So their motion to disqualify, dismiss the whole thing so it never goes to trial. And then and it's almost like, on the other hand, has reserved ruling. So no ruling on both matters. There's a really interesting interview here, and I think that's what I'm going to talk about tomorrow if something else doesn't big happen in true crime, or if you guys are still interested. Let me know in the comments if you're still interested in me covering the Karen Read case. But I have a lot more to say, but I think we've gone 3 hours, maybe long enough for today. So the judge is going to think on it and rule on it. If I had to guess, I would guess this is going to trial, because I had to have to look at what the supporting evidence is, but by what the prosecution said, it doesn't seem like, in the way it was argued, it doesn't seem like it's going to achieve what the defense wants. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Again, please leave a thumbs up. Please leave me a comment. I get a lot out of your comments. They really get me thinking. And let me know if you'd like me to cover this case some more. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks so much for listening.